Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Tonight, we're hitting the endless highways of Texas, where the blacktop stretches for miles and something waits just beyond the headlights. These aren't campfire tales. These are 20 true stories from drivers who experience terrifying encounters on lonely roads after dark dot, from phantom hitchhikers vanishing in rearview mirrors to headlights that appear behind you and never pass. These real-life accounts will make you think twice about driving through Texas after midnight. But here's something strange. So many of you are watching these videos but not subscribing. Seriously, does it cost money to subscribe? No. It's free. So if you're enjoying the ride into the unknown and want more stories that keep you up at night, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot and it keeps the horror rolling, because once you take that wrong turn in Texas, you might not be the one driving anymore. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments, because out here on these highways, something always rides with you. They say the road forgets no one, but I think it's the other way around. We forget the road. We forget what it saw, what it swallowed, what it still holds on to long after the headlines have faded and the graves have settled. I learned that the hard way one night in early March, just south of New Braunfels, driving a company hearse down I-35 with a body in the back and the kind of silence that sticks in your throat like cotton. The route wasn't long, maybe an hour or so to San Antonio, but I'd driven it 100 times before, usually during the day. Usually without anything strange happening. That night, though, was different. There was something in the air, heavy and wet, like the sky was thinking about crying but couldn't quite work up the nerve. The pavement glistened with old rain, and everything looked about 2 shades too dark for the time of night it was. That gray kind of darkness that comes before a storm you never hear coming. The kind that feels personal. I was 30 minutes out of town, just me and the dead man in back. Old guy named Harold Gibson, cancer. Family wanted him buried in the same cemetery where his wife was planted outside San Antonio. It was a routine job, quiet, dignified. Just like Harold, I suppose. I didn't know him, of course. You don't get to know the ones you drive, not really. But I always made it a point to talk to them anyway. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just so I didn't have to hear my own thoughts rattling around the inside of that long metal box. We were coming up on mile marker 191 when I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder, barefoot and soaked, with her hair hanging down in long dark ropes like it hadn't been dry in years. She wore a pale blue dress that clung to her like wet paper, and she wasn't waving or screaming or stumbling. She was just standing there, like she'd been waiting. I slowed the hearse without really thinking about it, more curious than alarmed. But the moment I tapped the brakes, something inside me pulled back like a dog on a short leash. Not fear exactly, more like a warning that came from somewhere deeper than my brain. I didn't stop, but I slowed enough to see her face. It was blank. Not expressionless, just blank. Like a chalkboard wiped clean but still bearing the faintest trace of old writing. And her eyes, they were wrong. I don't mean scary wrong or glowing or bleeding like some campfire story nonsense. I mean they looked like they'd seen too much water for too long. Like river stones, dull, smooth, and full of something that doesn't float. I passed her, heart ticking just a little faster than it should, and glanced in the side mirror. She was gone. I blinked. Looked again. Nothing but empty shoulder and the faint sheen of moisture on the grass. I shook my head and laughed under my breath. Nerves, I told myself. Fatigue, a trick of the light. I'd been doing this job too long. Maybe Harold wanted company. I was still half smiling when I looked over to the passenger seat. She was sitting there. I didn't scream. I didn't slam the brakes or veer off the road into a ditch like they do in movies. I just froze. My hand stayed glued to the wheel, my foot steady on the gas. The hearse kept rolling, 62 miles an hour on the dot. And she sat there, dripping silently onto the leather seat, hair clinging to her cheek, her hands folded in her lap like she was at church. For a moment, I thought maybe I was having a stroke. I stared ahead, afraid to look at her directly, convinced that if I turned too fast, she'd disappear and take my sanity with her. But then I caught the edge of movement, her hand rising slowly. She pointed behind us. No sound, no expression. Just that slow, deliberate gesture, as if to say, look back. I didn't, not right away. I kept driving another 100 yards or so, thinking maybe she was warning me, maybe someone was following us. Maybe this was all just the start of a real bad dream. Then, with a heart like a jackrabbit, I glanced at the rearview mirror. I couldn't see the road. I could see Harold's casket. Sure, the clean black box with brass handles reflecting the dash lights. But the rear window? It wasn't showing anything outside. No headlights, no night. No, I-35. It was dark. Just a flat, black nothing. Like we'd left the world behind and slipped into the part of a dream where you can't remember what your hands look like. I looked back at her. Her face hadn't changed, still empty, still wet, still pointing. I whispered, "What do you want?" She didn't answer. Just looked at me. Threw me. And then she was gone. No puff of smoke. No blink and fade out. Just there 1 second and not the next. The seat was wet, still dented where she'd been. And the smell earth and mold and old water lingered like it had soaked into the air. I didn't stop driving. I didn't even blink for a while. I just kept going, mouth dry, hands aching from how tight I was gripping the wheel. When I finally reached the funeral home in San Antonio, I sat in the parking lot for a good 10 minutes before moving. I didn't tell anyone what happened. What was there to say? That I'd picked up an extra passenger on the way down and she left before I could charge her, but I couldn't get her out of my head. Not just the way she looked, but the way she pointed. Like she needed something from back there. Like something was still out there, behind us. 2 weeks later, I asked around about that stretch of I-35. Got a couple weird looks, some shoulder shrugs. One old-timer, a gravedigger who'd been with the home forever, knew something. Sighed. "You see her, didn't you?" Like it was a joke. I didn't answer. Just waited. He said the river used to flood something fierce back in the 70s. 72 was bad, real bad. Tore up a lot of the area near New Braunfels. They found cars 100 yards from where they were last seen. Found people miles from home. And some, they never found at all. One of them was a woman, recently widowed, driving home from her sister's place. She took a detour because of the rising water. They think her car got caught in a washout near what's now mile marker 191. They searched for days, helicopters, divers. Nothing. He said she's still looking. That sometimes she appears on the road, always soaked, always silent, always pointing back. They say she's looking for her baby, he added. Buried somewhere back there, maybe. Or maybe she don't know she's dead. Maybe she just don't know how to leave. I've driven that route a few times since then, but only during the day. And never alone. Because there's something about the stretch near marker 191 that feels wrong. The way the wind moves. The way the clouds hang low. The way your headlights seem a little dimmer, like they scared too. And every time I pass it, I check the shoulder. I don't want to see her again, but I always look. Because if she's still out there, still waiting, still pointing, need to know she hasn't found what she's looking for. Not yet. Not me. The first time I saw the blue truck, I didn't think much of it. I was heading north on Highway 281 just outside of Marble Falls, Texas. It was mid-January. The kind of cold that doesn't quite bite but sticks to your clothes and skin like a damp fog. The cedar trees along the highway stood brittle and gray in the weak afternoon light, their dry needles whispering in the wind like something half dead. I had left my job in San Antonio a few hours earlier than usual, cut out early on a Friday, figuring I'd get a jump on the weekend. My parents had a place out past Burnett, a little stone farmhouse that used to be my grandfather's, and I hadn't been back in a while. I had planned on surprising them. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. There was barely any traffic, just a couple of beat-up pickups and long-haul semis blowing past me. I remember thinking how empty everything felt. I always liked that stretch of the drive, the way the road wound through limestone hills, past dry creeks and shuttered gas stations. You could imagine it was another time entirely, decades ago, before everything got paved over and strip malled. I was listening to an old Lucinda Williams CD, sipping lukewarm gas station coffee when I noticed the truck behind me. It was an old Chevrolet mid-70s maybe, a square body style with a faded blue paint job that had long since peeled to reveal patches of rust underneath. I don't know how long it had been following me, but it was suddenly close. Too close. I eased up on the gas a little, figuring maybe I'd let him pass. But he didn't. Just hovered there, 10 feet from my bumper, his high beams flicking on and off every few minutes. Not flashing, just tapping, like a signal. Or a game. I frowned and tapped my brake lights, a warning. He didn't back off. There wasn't a passing lane for a while, so I tried to ignore it, kept my hand steady on the wheel, eyes on the road. But I started to feel it then, that low, tight twist in my stomach, like something wasn't quite right, like the world had tilted just a little. He followed me like that for 10 miles dot. When we hit a stretch near the turnoff for Park Road 4, I swung right into the gravel shoulder and let him pass. Only he didn't. He stayed behind me, idling on. The shoulder too, maybe 30 feet back. I sat there, watching him in my rear view, my fingers clenched tight around the steering wheel. He didn't move. Just sat there, engine running, headlights burning white into the dusk. I didn't want to wait. I pulled back onto the road fast, gravel crunching under my tires, and the truck didn't follow. For a mile, maybe two, I didn't see him at all. And just when I started to think I was being paranoid, there he was again, closer than before. This time he didn't flick his lights. He just kept right on my bumper, like he was being towed behind me. I sped up. So did he. I slowed down. He matched me. I turned off the highway near Smithwick, taking a winding back road that led toward Inks Lake. It was almost dark now. The sun had dropped behind the hills, and the sky had turned a bruised purple. The road was narrow, hemmed in by bare trees and scrub. My heart was hammering in my chest. I didn't want to call the police, didn't want to believe it was anything more than a weird coincidence. But the way that truck followed me felt deliberate. And wrong God, at one point, I took a sharp turn and floored it, veering onto a dirt road that led down toward an old hunting lease my dad used to rent. I drove until I was deep into the trees, killed the lights, and sat in the dark, holding my breath. Nothing. No headlights. No engine. I waited 10 minutes, maybe more, then turned around and started making my way back toward the main road. When I reached it, the truck was gone. I made it to my parents' place around 7. My mom was surprised but happy to see me, though she kept asking if everything was all right. I must have looked shaken. I lied, said I'd had a weird run-in with a tailgater, but it was nothing. Just some jerk on the road. My dad, who's always been the skeptical type, made some offhand comment about city drivers not knowing how to handle the country roads. We had dinner, watched some old Western rerun, and I tried to push it out of my mind, but I couldn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept waking up thinking I heard gravel shifting outside. Kept checking the window, half expecting to see twin beams shining through the trees. Nothing ever came. It wasn't until the next morning, in town, that I heard about the truck. I'd gone into Marble Falls for breakfast, stopped at the Blue Bonnet Cafe. I was nursing a cup of coffee at the counter when I overheard two older guys talking near the back table, the one by the jukebox. One of them, a tall, lean guy with a sun-scorched neck and a Vietnam hat, was saying, "I saw it again last week near the bridge. Same blue truck. Wasn't no one driving it." The other man just nodded and said, "Heard it's been following folks again. Same as before. People who see it don't last long." I asked the waitress what they were talking about. She looked at me, eyes narrowing, and said, "The ghost truck. It's an old story. Been around forever. Shows up behind people, usually out-of-towners or folks that got something heavy on their mind. Follows them for miles, then it vanishes. Always shows back up though, closer." I told her I'd seen something like that the day before. Her face went pale. "You see it again," she said. "You don't stop. Don't pull over. Don't look in the mirror. And whatever you do, don't let it catch up." That night, I started home. I took a different route. Swung east through Liberty Hill and tried to stay on the bigger highways. But somewhere north of Bertram, I saw it again, parked on the shoulder near a thicket of dead oak trees. Same truck. Same blue paint, rusted through. Empty in the cab. I passed it doing 60, heart slamming. Didn't look back, but 10 minutes later it was behind me again. No headlights this time. Just a looming presence in the rear view, floating like a shadow. I don't remember making the turn. Onto 183. Don't remember hitting the gas or flying past the blinking red light at Briggs. All I remember is the fear. Raw, cold fear. I finally pulled into a gas station near Lampasas, shaking, and called my boyfriend, told him to come get me. I left my car there. He never saw the truck. No one else ever did, but I kept seeing it. A glimpse in the rear view, parked in an empty lot or passing. Me slow on the other side of a country road. It never made a sound. Never moved when I watched. But it was always closer than I remembered. A month later, I found out that another driver had died on that same stretch of 281 just north of Marble Falls. Lost control. Slammed into a tree. Witnesses said she'd been driving erratically, like she was trying to outrun something. Her name was Lila Raymond. I didn't know her, but the name stuck with me. I looked her up. Found an obituary online, and in the comments, someone had written, "She told me she saw a blue truck the night before. Thought it was following her. I thought she was joking." That was when I stopped driving alone. I started taking back roads. Staying in town, I got rid of my car. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear the sound of tires on gravel outside my apartment. And I'll wait in the dark, holding my breath, afraid to look out the window, because I know what I'll see. Just two white headlights and a shadow, waiting. Closer now. Always closer. He was somewhere west of Sonora when he first noticed the sign. Miles of highway had slipped under his tires, a long gray ribbon stretching endlessly through the sun-scoured Texas landscape. The August heat shimmered on the road, and the hum of the AC in his rented SUV was barely holding back the oven outside. He hadn't seen another car in half an hour, not unusual for this part of I-10. Dry hills rolled up against the sky, the brush sparse. Everything dusty and faded like the whole world had been left out in the sun too long. Chris had been driving for hours. He was heading from Austin to El Paso for a job interview, a technical writer's position with some defense contractor. He wasn't excited about it. Not really. It was just the best offer on the table after months of freelancing that hadn't panned out. He didn't even like the desert much. But it was something. A lifeline. His bladder finally twisted tight enough to make him glance at the fuel gauge and the empty road. He hadn't stopped since Junction, 2 hours back. The SUV was at half a tank, more than enough to make it to Fort Stockton, but he still scanned for signs. He figured he'd pull off somewhere small, stretch his legs, grab a soda, piss in peace. That's when he saw it. A green sign with white block lettering. Clean and new looking, like it had just been put up yesterday. Rest stop and FUEL exit. 2041 MILE. The numbers didn't register at first. He wasn't tracking the exits. He just zoned out, watching the horizon vibrate in the heat. But the sign was clear, and it even had one of those little gas pump icons. Next to a knife and fork dot, another sign followed. Tumbleweed Service Plaza Food, Fuel, Restrooms. Next exit. He hadn't seen it on the map. He was sure of that, but he could have missed it. He was tired. It was easy to overlook stuff out here where everything blurs together. So he took the exit. The ramp curved off I-10, gently downward, and almost immediately the terrain seemed different. The dry hills flattened out, the brush thinning further, until there was little more than brittle grass and occasional fence posts. The road leading to the service plaza was paved, but old. Worn, cracked in long streaks like a spiderweb across both lanes. The sun dimmed slightly as a thin veil of clouds rolled in from nowhere. It didn't feel cooler, just grayer. The plaza was maybe half a mile from the highway. He saw it from a distance. A squat gas station with a red awning, a diner connected to one side. The lot was paved but cracked and full of potholes. A single old pickup sat by one of the pumps, hood open, steam rising. A man leaned over the engine. Chris pulled into the lot and parked near the side of the building. As soon as he stepped out of the car, he noticed how quiet it was. No birds, no cicadas. Not even the wind, which had been rattling the sagebrush just minutes earlier. The air was heavy, dull, almost like inside a building. It smelled faintly of oil and something else faintly sour, like old meat gone bad but masked by gasoline. The sign above the door read Tumbleweed Gas and Grill. Its letters faded and half burned out. The red paint had peeled back from the wood. Underneath, exposing gray slats. Chris went inside. The air conditioning was running, but weak. A couple of ceiling fans rotated slowly. The gas station half was cluttered and dim, the overhead fluorescents flickering. A long, narrow counter stretched across the back, behind which sat a dusty register and a shelf of cigarettes and candy. Next to it, the diner part was sectioned off by a low wall with a pass-through window. Behind the counter stood a man in a red-collared shirt with a grease-stained apron. He was tall and thin, maybe late 50s, with a deep furrow between his brows. His face was tanned and leathery, but his eyes were pale, almost translucent. He didn't look up when Chris entered, just continued scribbling something on a yellow notepad with a mechanical pencil. Restroom? Chris asked. The man pointed vaguely, without lifting his head. Round back. Out the door, left side. Chris nodded and headed out again, walking along the building. Sure enough, there was a door marked Men, slightly ajar. The restroom was dim, lit by a flickering bulb, but clean enough. He pissed quickly, washed his hands at a sink with a cracked mirror above it, and then stared at his reflection for a moment too long. His face looked wrong, not in a dramatic way, not like a horror movie, just off, like he was looking at a photo of himself taken by someone who hated him. Flat, tired, pale. He shook it off, went back inside. He grabbed a Coke and a bag of chips from a leaning shelf and walked up to the counter. The man finally looked up. His gaze was strange, direct, but unfocused, like someone who was pretending to make eye contact without really seeing you. That all? Yeah. The man punched keys on the register, then reached under the counter and pulled out a small receipt printer, the kind you see in older stores. It whirred to life. The man tore off the paper and handed it to Chris along with a Coke. Chris glanced at it automatically. $3.79. Sale ID number 0026. July 27, 2025, 2:46 p.m. Tumbleweed Service Plaza Attendant. Leo Customer. Christopher J. Hawa. Chris. Froze. He hadn't given his name. He hadn't used a card. No ID. No tap to pay. He had cash in his wallet. He hadn't even opened it yet. He looked up, heart suddenly thudding in his chest. How did you? Leo smiled. It was a small, dry smile. Have a safe trip now. Chris stared at him, the cold sweat forming under his shirt. Is this some kind of joke? Did I have a tag or something? But Leo had already turned away, back to his notepad. Chris left. The man by the truck was gone now, the hood still open. Steam no longer rose from it. The pickup looked like it had been there a long time, tires half deflated, paint worn to rust, one window broken. Weeds had grown up around the wheels. Chris climbed into his SUV and locked the doors. He took a deep breath and pulled out of the lot. Back to the on-ramp, only it wasn't there. The road he had come in on just ended. It petered out into gravel and dirt with tall grass beyond. No signs. No ramp, no highway in sight. Just open land and the low hills beyond. He spun the wheel, heart pounding now. Drove back to the station, but it was gone. Not collapsed, not burned, just gone. A wide, empty lot, cracked and covered in dust. No building. No pumps, no signs. Just an open stretch of concrete that looked like nothing had been there in decades. He got out of the car and walked the lot in slow circles, stomach churning. The station had been, there was a square patch of scorched earth, as if something huge had been burned to the ground long ago. In the dirt, among some scattered gravel, he saw something half buried. A crumpled receipt. He picked it up. The same one. Same time, same items, same name. His name. Chris drove for 2 hours in aimless circles before he found a road that led to another highway. It wasn't I-10, but it eventually took him to a sheriff's station outside Azona. He told them everything. Left nothing out. The deputy on duty, a young guy with a crooked nose, listened with a tight, polite smile and then nodded. Slowly. There ain't no exit 204. Not out here. Closest one is 202, and that's just a cattle gate. You sure you didn't get turned around? Chris showed him the receipt. The deputy stared at it, his fingers going stiff. Then he took a deep breath, folded the slip of paper in half, and slid it into his desk drawer. I'm gonna hang on to this, he said softly. You should get back on the road. Don't stop till Fort Stockton, all right? Chris didn't argue. He drove all night, not looking in the mirrors. Weeks later, back in Austin, he tried to look it up. Tumbleweed Service Plaza. Nothing. Not on Google Maps. Not on any highway forums. No old Yelp reviews. Not even in those weird threads where people post about ghost roads and dead malls. It was like it never existed. But the worst part came 3 days later when he got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of receipt paper, stained and yellowed. Handwritten on the back, in neat block letters, were 3 words, "See you again." The handwriting was his own. They were halfway down FM 170 when the man appeared on the side of the road, thumb sticking out stiff and sure like he'd been standing there a while, maybe longer. The sun was smearing itself across the desert sky, a bruised orange and sinking, fast behind the sawtoothed ridges of the Big Bend. The heat hadn't gone. though it clung to everything like a second skin, like sweat you couldn't wipe off. Mike had one hand on the wheel of the aging Suburban, the other resting loosely on Rachel's thigh. She was flipping through their road atlas even though the road was a straight, unbending snake from Lajitas to Presidio with the Rio Grande. Whispering just past the shoulder, when they saw the hitchhiker, Mike slowed down instinctively. There was something about him that didn't set off alarms, not right away. He looked like he belonged out here. Wore a dusty pearl snap shirt, jeans faded to the color of riverbed silt, and a wide-brimmed straw cowboy hat that shaded most of his face. He had a small duffel bag slung over one shoulder, the kind you might have taken to gym class in 1975. "You gonna stop?" Rachel asked, not looking up. Mike did. The man approached without hurrying, just a slow and steady gait, boots scuffing against the gravel. When he got close enough, Mike rolled down the window and said, "Where you headed?" "Just down a ways," the man said. His voice was calm, steady, deep, Presidial due. There was something in his accent, Texan, sure, but not the kind you heard much anymore. Old-fashioned, with long vowels and quiet R's, like it had been learned in one of those one-room schools that disappeared sometime around the Carter administration. Mike glanced at Rachel, who shrugged. "Sure," he said. "Hop in." The man climbed into the back seat, careful and deliberate. He placed the duffel on the floor and sat with both hands on his knees like a kid in Sunday school. Rachel turned in her seat and gave him a polite smile. "You from around here?" "Was," he said, settling back. "Long time ago." They drove for a while in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel awkward, just full. The Suburbans. Tires hummed on the pavement, and the river glinted off to their left, brown and sluggish. The desert stretched forever on both sides, dotted with creosote and mesquite, and the sky above turned darker, star-pricked. As twilight gave way to true night, the man didn't say much at first, just answered questions when they came, he said. His name was Everett. Didn't give a last name, and they didn't press. He said he used to work out near Terlingua, back when the mercury mines were still open. That caught Mike's attention. "I thought those shut down in the 70s. He said. "They did," Everett replied. "I was there before they did." Rachel turned slightly, peering at him in the rearview mirror. "What year are you talking?" Everett smiled. Just the corners of his mouth turned up. "About 78. Something about the way he said. It made Rachel shift in her seat. Not scared, exactly, just colder. Mike felt it too, a shift in the air. Like when a cloud slides in front of the sun and everything turns quiet, like the animals know something you don't. They passed an old gas station abandoned, half its roof gone, the sign rusted to illegibility. Mike flicked his headlights. Up a notch. That stretch of FM 170 between the park and the border towns had a reputation. Long, lonely, and full of ghosts. Locals told stories, the kind you heard in bars when the lights were low and the beer was warm. Stories about things seen on the riverbank at night, things that moved without sound. People who weren't people. Rachel turned back toward Everett, suddenly curious. "You ever hear about that ghost town outside Redford? The one with the burned-up church?" Everett didn't answer. Rachel glanced back again. The back seat was empty. Mike looked in the mirror, heart kicking into overdrive. "Where'd he go?" "I don't know," Rachel whispered. "He was just there." Mike swerved to a stop, tires skidding slightly on the shoulder. The Suburban idled, ticking and clicking in the silence. Mike jumped out, opened the back door. Nothing. No Everett. No footprints in the dust. Just the duffel bag sitting there like it had always been. They didn't say anything for a long while. Finally, Mike picked up the duffel. It was heavier than it looked. Worn, the canvas frayed at the seams. Inside they found clothes folded neatly, old clothes like someone's Sunday best from 40 years ago. A flask, empty. A pocket knife with a bone handle. And a photo dot, it was a Polaroid, faded with time. 3 people stood in front of a low, cracked headstone. The man in the middle wore the same straw cowboy hat, the same calm expression. Mike's hand shook as he turned the photo over. On the back, someone had written in pen, "Big Bend Cemetery, August 1978, Everett's final ride." There was a name etched into the stone behind them. Everett James Madsen, 1949 to 1978. Gone but not lost. Rachel stared at it for a long time. That was almost 50 years ago, Mike nodded slowly. He looked out into the dark, across the desert where the moon was just beginning to rise, throwing the crests of the ridges into silver relief. The air felt too still now. Wrong dot, he dropped the photo back into the bag, zipped it shut, and tossed it into the back. "Let's go." They drove in silence for a long time. Rachel didn't flip through the atlas anymore. Mike kept one eye on the road, the other on the rearview mirror, even though it showed nothing but empty seats and deeper dark. They didn't speak about Everett again, not to each other, not to anyone. But a few days later, something pulled at Mike, a need to see if it was real. He borrowed a truck from a friend in Presidio and drove back up FM 170 alone. He parked near an old turnoff and walked out into the brush, following a hunch dot it took. Most of the day, but he found it an overgrown lot behind a chain-link fence, rusted through in places. A cemetery with no signs, no roads, just a broken path of stone and dust. He wandered until he saw the headstone, almost hidden behind a knot of dry mesquite. Everett James Madsen. The same name, the same dates. The same grave dot, and beneath it, half sunk into the dry earth, a boot print. Fresh. New. Too new. Mike left the desert that night and never came back. But sometimes, when he's driving late and the sky gets that orange bruised look, he swears he sees someone standing by the road, just standing, waiting dot, and he keeps driving. Loop 1604 circled the outer edge of San Antonio like a noose, catching everything from the hill country's western slope to the smothering flatlands in the south. There's a stretch on the northeast side, just past a crumbling shell station, and an old pecan grove that's been withering in the drought for a decade. That stretch bends into a wide, sloping curve, banked wrong, smooth as glass in the rain. Locals call it Devil's Curve. Nobody official will tell you why, but ask any record driver or old-timer, and they'll mumble the same thing. Folks don't make it out of that turn. You'd think it was an exaggeration. You'd be wrong. Caleb. Maura was a courier, working for a small-time logistics outfit that moved all sorts of odd freight across Texas medical coolers. Court documents, blood work samples, sometimes boxes he wasn't supposed to open. He didn't care. He liked the driving. Long hours, middle of the night, Texas radio crackling static through the hill country. He said it cleared his head, gave him time to think. He was 38, divorced, and living in a small duplex off Culebra. Nothing fancy. His friends had all moved on, most to the suburbs, some to graves. But Caleb, he just kept driving dot. It was a Friday night in late October, and he had a delivery scheduled out near New Braunfels. Something from a lab and medical center to a private address just north of town. The package was small, sealed in dry ice, and marked tissue time sensitive. The client had paid extra for a late-night run, so Caleb packed his thermos, topped off the tank, and hit Loop 1604 a little after 11 p.m. It was chilly for South Texas. One of those rare nights when the cold blew down hard and dry. From the plains, skimming across the ground like a living thing, He took the outer loop counterclockwise, passing empty strip malls and dark churches, sliding into that odd part of town where streetlights get sparse and the oak trees crowd close. The kind of area where the FM stations start fading out and you're stuck with AM talk and the endless silence of your own engine. Somewhere between FM 2252 and Lookout Road, a thick fog began to settle, not gradual, but sudden and sharp, as if it dropped like a blanket. His headlights went milky. The pavement disappeared under him. The air itself looked greasy, almost yellow. He slowed to a crawl. Then came the curve. He didn't even realize it at first. The curve sloped gently but wide, longer than he remembered, the fog swallowing the shoulders on both sides. Then the road began to bank oddly, like a half pipe pulling at the tires. The wheel twitched in his hands. That's when the screaming started. It wasn't music, wasn't a mechanical noise either. It was human. High-pitched, frantic, broken up with gasps and wet coughing. It came from inside the cab, close, intimate. Caleb flinched, looked over his shoulder. Nothing. The back seat was empty. His radio wasn't on. He turned the air off, the fan off. Everything. Still, the screaming came. It seemed to move from the passenger seat to the back, to just above his head. Then it stopped, as sudden as it had begun. His breath fogged the windshield. He hadn't even realized he was breathing that hard. That's when the words appeared. They formed in the condensation on the inside of the glass, not all at once. Letter by letter. Like someone was dragging a fingertip through the fog, writing from the inside out. Don't stop. His foot hit the gas instinctively, but the tires spun. He hadn't realized he'd stopped. The van idled at a crawl now, the engine rattling. In protest, headlights reduced to two pale discs. A figure stepped briefly into the light, no more than a glimpse. Young, thin, maybe a girl. She stood just outside the arc of vision, arms at her sides, hair clinging to her face like seaweed. Then she was gone. Caleb shouted and jerked the wheel. The van fishtailed, and for a moment he saw fire reflected in the fog-orange blossoms. Licking the road's edge. It wasn't real. Couldn't be. There was nothing burning. But the smell, goddamn, the smell of melting plastic and cooked flesh slammed through the vents like it had been waiting. The screams came again, louder now. 4 voices, maybe more. It was a chorus of terror, inhuman in its intensity, like they were reliving something, begging. One voice cut through them all, a girl's, raw and pleading. Please don't leave us. He punched the accelerator. The van jerked forward. The curve ended abruptly. The fog thinned like stepping out of a dream. Behind him, the road vanished into gray. He didn't stop again until he hit the Yee parking lot off 46, dry heaving into the cracked pavement while the van's engine ticked and cooled. He opened the cargo bay just to be sure. The package was still there, but the air inside the van was wrong, hotter, staler. Like something had been breathing in there too long. He made the drop, didn't say a word. Took 35 back into town, but that night was just the start. In the days that followed, the van changed. The passenger seat stayed warm after he'd been alone. All night. The radio flipped to static at 3:33 a.m. no matter what. One morning, he came out to find black handprints on the inside of the back windows, small, like a child's, but burned into the glass. He scrubbed them. They came back. He asked around, searched old police reports, dug through the kinds of forums where ghost hunters and highway patrol intersect. And finally, he found it, October 31st, 2013, 10 years prior to the week. 4 high. School seniors had been driving home from a party drunk, maybe high. Took Devil's Curve too fast. Hit the bank's shoulder, flipped twice, landed in the Pecan Grove. The car burst into flames. Witnesses said they heard screaming for a full minute before the gas tank ignited and went silent. All four burned alive. No one could get close in. Time. The fire melted the nearby trees. The odd part? They hadn't died instantly. Toxicology showed 2 of them were conscious up to the final moments, clawing at the doors, kicking out glass, trying to scream through the fire. There'd been roadside memorials back then, crosses, flowers, but they'd all vanished. The city cleared them during a right-of-way expansion a few years back. Paved over it. Forgot it, but the DIDN single quotes T. One night, 2 weeks after the fog, Caleb was parked at a Circle K, eating a microwave burrito when he saw the news. Another crash at Devil's. Curve, a delivery driver. Late night run. Van burned completely. No survivors. He checked the photo. Same make. Same company. He quit the next morning. Dropped off the van, keys still hot in his hand. Told dispatch he had stomach problems, moved back in with his sister in Odessa. But the dreams didn't stop. Even now, years later, Caleb swears he can still hear them when the wind gets high thin. Desperate screams trailing on the air like tattered flags. Especially in October, especially on the Bend, and always. The same words whispered through cracked glass and rising heat. Don't stop here. The first time John saw the sign, it was just past midnight. The family had been on the road for 8 hours already, winding their way through the dark stretch of Route 287 heading southwest toward Wichita Falls. His wife, Karen, had fallen. Asleep in the passenger seat a couple hours earlier, her head resting awkwardly against the window, a paperback slipping from her lap. The kids, 10-year-old Eli and 6-year-old Molly, were knocked out in the back seat, each with a tablet glowing dimly in their laps, long since forgotten. John was tired, but not dangerously so. Not yet. Just that buzzing edge of exhaustion, where the lines on the road blur a little too easily and your mind starts to invent shadows where there shouldn't be any. The highway was mostly empty at that hour. Just the occasional 18-wheeler barreling past in the opposite direction. And the low hum of the tires on the road became a kind of trance. So when he saw the green reflective sign, it felt like relief. It stood tall and clean by the shoulder, unbent and oddly pristine in a stretch of Texas highway known for its weather-worn signage. White block letters read, "Rest stop to 2 miles." John exhaled, shifting slightly in the seat. Good. He needed to piss, and maybe he could stretch his legs, splash water on his face. Let the kids sleep a little longer before they stopped for the night. They hadn't seen another real gas station or service plaza since Vernon, and that was over an hour ago. 2 miles. He kept one eye on the odometer. The sign had been planted just after the 119-mile marker. He clicked it over in his mind as he passed 121. Then 123. Nothing. Just more dark. Endless road and brushwood flashing by under the headlights. Faint silhouettes of mesquite trees hunched along the shoulder like waiting figures. Karen stirred. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said. "Saw a sign for a rest stop. Must have missed it." She rubbed her eyes, leaned forward a little to peer into the darkness. "You sure it wasn't an old sign?" "It looked brand new." She frowned but said nothing. The kids were still out cold, and the last thing she wanted was to wake them just to debate a roadside marker. By 130, John was sure he hadn't missed it. There had been no exit, no parking lot, no lonely building with humming vending machines and humming fluorescents, no toilets that reeked of bleach and ammonia. Just road. A straight black ribbon unspooling in front of them, occasional dots of light from distant farmhouses flickering like dying stars in the distance. Karen sat up more fully. "I'm gonna check the GPS. Maybe it got moved." Sometimes those signs are wrong. But the GPS mounted to the dash, old but reliable, didn't show any rest area. No turnoffs, no exits. Just Route 287 stretching into forever. The tiny digital car on the screen crawled forward, dead center on the thin yellow line of the highway. John laughed nervously. Maybe it's a new one, just hasn't been updated yet. She nodded slowly, but he could tell the joke hadn't landed. Something about this was off. They passed another mile marker. 132. Still nothing. Then another sign. Rest stop to 2 mile east. John blinked. What the hell? Curran stared. That's the same sign. No, he said, a bit too quickly. Must be another one. But even he didn't believe that. It was identical. Same size, same pristine lettering, same tilt to the right, no graffiti, no bullet holes, no bird droppings. It was as if it had been stamped into the world minutes ago. I think we should turn around, she said. To what? There's nothing behind us either. She didn't answer. Just sat back and folded her arms, suddenly alert, suddenly tense. She kept glancing at the kids who were still sound asleep. It was strange, too strange. Normally Molly would wake up if a squirrel farted near the car. But now she was curled into the seat like she was in a coma. They kept driving. The road didn't curve, didn't change. The stars overhead were pale and scattered, the moon nowhere to be seen. When the third rest stop, 2 mile sign appeared, Karen said, "Okay, I'm not imagining this." John felt cold sweat starting down his neck. There's no way we've just gone in a straight line this whole time. We've passed Wichita Falls by now, right? She checked the GPS again. It showed them still east of the city. John, she said quietly, we've gone 25 miles since that first sign. But the GPS still says we're 5 miles from Wichita Falls. It hasn't changed. He pulled over. Gravel crunched under the tires as they coasted onto the shoulder. He got out, stretched, looked up and down the road. Still empty. Still straight. Then he opened the app on his phone that logged the trip's data. The drive log showed something that didn't make sense. The car had been looping. Not in zigzags or wide turns, just a perfect, slow, invisible circle. The GPS trail looked like someone had drawn an oval around the same stretch of road over and over again. 5, maybe 6 times. He showed it to Karen. That's impossible, she whispered. They decided to backtrack. John drove 30 minutes. In the opposite direction. No towns appeared, no gas stations. Not even the exit for Vernon. Only more trees, more brush, and eventually another rest stop minus 2 mile sign. This time, Karen cried. They kept driving through the night. At one point, John fell asleep at the wheel just for a second, jolted awake by Karen's scream as the car veered over the rumble strip. They stopped again, checked the kids. Still asleep. Too deeply. Karen tried shaking Molly gently. Her head lulled, but her eyes didn't open. She's burning up, she whispered. Her hand was trembling. She's burning, John. They tried calling 911. No signal, not even 1 bar. Karen sobbed into her hands. This isn't real. It can't be real. But it was. They tried turning off the car. Sitting in silence, listening. But there was nothing. No crickets, no wind. Even the stars looked frozen, too bright, too numerous. Like they were painted on. Sometime around 4:30 a.m., they saw something new. A figure, standing in the middle of the road. John braked hard, the tires squealing. The figure didn't move. It was a man, maybe. Thin, dressed in dark clothes, pale as chalk, but too far to make out clearly. No car nearby. Just standing, waiting. John flicked his high beams on. The figure blinked out of existence. Just gone. Like a slide switch flipped. Karen was shaking. I want to go. I want to go home." But they didn't know which way was home anymore. When dawn finally broke, they had driven 127 miles according to the odometer. The GPS still said 5. They found a gas station around 6:20 a.m. It blinked into existence like a mirage. Buds. Stop and Shop. The lights were on. The air smelled of old oil and coffee. A wiry man with a toothpick in his mouth leaned on the counter. "Long night?" he said casually. Karen couldn't even speak. John asked where they were. The man didn't look surprised when he answered. "Same place ye been for hours. But at least you made it out." "What?" The man nodded toward a corner of the store. Nailed to the wall were a series of faded Polaroids. People, couples, families, all standing in front of the same rest stop, 2 mile sign. Some were smiling. Some weren't. John felt his stomach twist. The man said, "Only happens once or twice a year." That loop, most folks don't even notice. They get tired, see the sign, and next thing you know, they're gone. Takes something real bad to wake you up and break through it. Karen was hugging both kids now, crying. They were awake, confused, tired. "What do you mean, gone?" John asked. The man looked at him for a long time. "Not every family makes it out. Some folks, well, they keep driving. For years, maybe, still driven. You were lucky. It let you go." John didn't ask who it was. He didn't want to know. They filled up the car, drove the rest of the way to Wichita Falls in dead silence. They never saw that sign again. It was late October, and the wind coming off the hills north of Llano had a strange weight to it, like it carried stories in it, or regrets. The kind of wind that bends the grass low and whispers just outside your window, like it's trying to remind you of something you've worked hard to forget. Michael hadn't meant to be out so late on TX16, but a call from his mother's hospice nurse had pulled him from Austin like a hook in the gut. She was okay, but confused again, slipping deeper into the fog that had taken her. By the time he'd left Llano Regional and started the long drive back home, the sun had long since dipped below the ridgeline, and the road had gone black in that true Texas way. No lights, no landmarks, just the glint of eyes from roadside, deer, and the dull hum of tires on pitted pavement. He was somewhere between Llano and Baby Head when he saw the lantern. Not headlights, not a flickering flashlight or a reflector vest, a damn lantern. The kind with a glass globe and a metal top, the flame inside dim and yellow, swaying with every step. It was being carried by a man walking along the shoulder, right edge of the lane, moving slowly with a slight limp. Michael eased up on the gas, squinting through the windshield. There weren't any other cars on the road. Hell, there weren't even fences anymore. Just open range, the kind you don't think still exists until you're out in it, and you realize how much land is still ruled by nothing but sky and rock and old, hard soil. He pulled over instinctively, rolling down the passenger window. "Hey, you all right?" The man stopped. He was old, thin, with a collapsed sort of frame, like a scarecrow that had been left out too many seasons. His beard was long and gray, patchy in spots, and his eyes looked like wet stones reflecting the lantern light. He didn't come closer, just stood a few feet from the car, the lantern trembling in his hand, casting slow-moving shadows across his sunken face. "No need," the man said, voice like wind through dead leaves. "You're almost where I died." Michael blinked. "What?" But the man had already turned away, except he hadn't walked off. He just faded. Not like smoke, not like a movie effect. He was there, then he wasn't, and the lantern went out with a final flicker that left Michael staring into absolute black. He sat there for a moment, unsure if what he saw was real or some trick of exhaustion and bad light. The night had gone. Suddenly colder. He turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click. The dashboard lights were dead. He tried again, harder. Nothing. The car wasn't just stalled. It was gone cold, like the battery had been ripped clean out. He sat back, heart starting to beat faster, listening to the wind blow dust and dried leaves against the side of the car. Time passed strangely. Minutes stretched, bent, lost all shape. He kept trying the key every few minutes, tapping at his. Phono signal, of course. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote howled, long and high and mournful, followed by a stillness that settled into Michael's chest like a sickness. At some point, he just stopped trying and sat in the dark, window half down. Hearing the wind talk to the trees, he might have drifted off. Hard to say. But when the dash lights finally blinked back on around 3:30 a.m., he started the car without thinking, just slammed it into gear and drove. Didn't look back, didn't stop until he saw the distant glow of Burnett's gas station lights like fireflies on the edge of the hills. Michael told himself it was a hallucination. That kind of thing happened, didn't it? Stress, grief, exhaustion, he'd barely slept in days. He told himself that, but it didn't stick. Not when the mechanic in Austin looked at the car the next day and said nothing was wrong. Not when the nurse called again 2 days later to say his mother had asked him to stay away from the road where the lantern burns. He didn't remember telling her, but she'd always had that kind of intuition, even now, half lost to time and memory. For a while, he avoided TX16 altogether, going the long way through Marble Falls if he had to visit. But it nagged at him, the way that man had spoken, not warning, not threatening, just informing. Like it was a truth Michael would come to understand whether he wanted to or not. By December, the nightmares had started, always the same. He was walking the road at night, alone, barefoot. The stars were bright, cruel, and wrong. The wind pulled at his clothes. Up ahead, the lantern bobbed, swaying gently, leading him. He never saw the old man again in the dream, just the lantern and something else. Something just off the edge of the road. Something vast and black that pressed against the darkness like a breath held too long. He'd wake up soaked in sweat, mouth full of dust. Eventually, curiosity and dread drove him back. Not in the middle of the night, he wasn't stupid, but during a gray afternoon just after Christmas. The air was cold, brittle. He parked on the shoulder near where he remembered the man vanishing. Nothing out of place. The road was still cracked and rough, lined with mesquite and cedar, empty as ever. He walked the shoulder slowly, eyes scanning. For anything. A grave marker, an old homestead, anything to explain it. What he found was a patch of earth just beyond the ditch where nothing grew. Not grass, not weeds, nothing. A smooth circle of bare dirt maybe 6 feet across, like the ground had been scraped clean. He knelt down, touched it cold as ice, even in the afternoon sun. When he stood, something caught his eye in the roadside. Gravel. A piece of metal, small and round. He picked it up. It was a rusted lantern knob. After that, things started unraveling. He stopped sleeping, lost weight. His girlfriend left, said he talked in his sleep about fires in the dark and lantern. Men. He started seeing flashes of the old man's face in crowds and reflections in the window of his dark TV. He tried to tell people, but every time he brought it up, something would go wrong. His phone would die mid-call. Power would flicker. Lights would buzz and go out. Finally, he gave up trying. Then, late one night in March, he was driving west again. Something pulled him, something deep and final. He left his phone on the kitchen counter, filled the tank, and drove with no music, no distraction, just the sound of his breathing and the road under his tires. The lantern was waiting. Not on the shoulder this time, right in the middle of the lane, burning brighter than it had before. He didn't brake. They say they found his car upside down in a shallow creek bed. No sign of impact, no other vehicles. Just a single clean set of skid marks leading off the road. The battery was dead. The clock frozen at 3:12 a.m. some nights. If you drive north of Llano, just past Baby Head, you might see a light on the road. Don't stop. Don't look too close. Because you're almost where he died. And now, maybe, you're almost where you will too. The rain had just started again when Tom Lacey saw her. He was somewhere between Clyde and Abilene, cruising down I-20 in his dusty red Tacoma with a busted left headlight and a passenger seat, cluttered with empty fast food wrappers and gas station. Receipts. The highway was nearly deserted, just the endless Texas flatlands, a rising curtain of black clouds, and the kind of dark that pressed against the windows like something alive. Tom was heading home from a 3-day roofing job out. In Odessa, tired as hell, thinking mostly about the cold beer waiting for him in the fridge. He almost didn't see her at first, just a pale shape by the roadside, unmoving, half lost in the slanting rain and tall weeds. Then she staggered forward into his headlights. He hit the brakes hard. The truck fishtailed slightly on the wet asphalt before skidding to a stop. Heart pounding, Tom shoved it into park, flung open the door, and ran toward her. She was barefoot, soaked, covered in what looked like mud and dried blood. Her dress white or maybe pale yellow clung too, her like wet paper, torn in several places. Her face was smeared and scratched, her hair matted, but her eyes were wide open and sharp. Tom thought she might be 17, maybe younger, but her expression wasn't childlike. It was haunted. Hollow-eyed, he reached her just as her knees buckled. He caught her under the arms, expecting dead weight, but she was light, bird-boned, trembling. She didn't speak right away, just let herself be carried to the truck, like her legs had forgotten how to work. He helped her up into the passenger seat, brushed aside a pile of wrappers to give her room. She was shaking violently, soaking. The upholstery. Tom cranked the heat. "You all right?" "Jesus, what happened to you?" She turned her head slowly, eyes fixed straight ahead. "He's still down there." Tom stared at her. "What?" "In the ditch," she whispered, voice rough, like her throat had been scraped raw. "He's still down there." The words hung in the cab like a bad smell. Tom turned to look back at the dark stretch of highway. The ditch was a ragged scar in the earth, overgrown and half-flooded now. Nothing moved out there. Just rain and shadows and wind. Tom swallowed. "You mean someone hurt you? There's someone back there?" She didn't answer. Her arms were wrapped tight around her ribs now, shivering. Her gaze stayed fixed forward, unblinking. Tom looked at her a second longer, then grabbed his phone and called 911. They told him to stay put. An officer would be there in 15 minutes. Tom left the flashers on and waited, staring out into the black wetness beyond the windshield. Every so often, he glanced at the girl. She didn't speak. Again, didn't blink. Just sat there like something pulled out of a grave. When the deputy finally arrived, Tom flagged him down and gave a quick rundown. Officer was a thick guy in his 50s named Monroe. Big mustache, slow voice. He took one look at the girl and called for backup and EMTs. They searched the ditch. First Monroe and another deputy, flashlights sweeping the brush. Then more officers. A K-9 unit, floodlights. They combed the entire area. They found no body, no man, no blood trail, no weapon, nothing but disturbed soil and 2 long, deep gouges in the earth like claw marks. One of the deputies said it looked like someone or something had tried to dig their way out. Tom wasn't sure what unsettled him more, the fact that they found no man or the way the girl just watched, still and silent, as if she already knew they wouldn't. Later, at the hospital, the girl wouldn't say much. She gave her name Abby Wells, 16, missing for 3 days from a small town outside Sweetwater. Her parents had filed a report, thinking she'd run off with a boyfriend. She said she didn't remember what happened. Said she'd been in the ditch, said he had been there too. Wouldn't say who he was, wouldn't describe him, wouldn't say anything else. Tom gave a full statement and was allowed to leave. He drove home in silence, the girl's voice echoing over and over in his head. He's still down there. That should have been the end of it. But a week later, Monroe called. "You ain't gonna believe this," he said. "That ditch? We went back. Soil collapsed near one of the claw marks. We dug it out. Found bones. Animal bones, mostly coyote, raccoon, but buried deep, like something was hoarding them or feeding down there." Tom felt a cold pinch in his gut. "You think she was telling the truth?" he asked. There was a long pause. Then Monroe said, "Son, I don't know what the hell she saw, but that ground ... it didn't look right, like it had been tunneled, like something was living under there." Tom didn't sleep that night, or the night after. He tried not to think about the ditch, but it kept creeping back into his mind. That stretch of road, the girl's voice, the marks in the dirt. He started driving different routes to work, avoiding I-20. He told himself it was coincidence when the nightmares started, dreams of being buried alive, of hearing something breathing in the walls. 3 weeks later, Monroe went missing, disappeared during a solo patrol. Last seen on dashcam, parked on the shoulder near the same mile marker where Tom had found the girl. His car was found the next morning, driver's door wide open, engine still running. His radio crackled out 5 words just before the feed cut. "He's still down there, goddammit." They searched the ditch again. Brought out heavy equipment this time. Excavated 20 feet. Nothing. No body. No tunnel. Just more claw marks, deeper this time. Older. Layered. Like something had been digging and redigging the same spot for years. A week after that, the girl disappeared. Vanished from the psychiatric ward where she was being observed. No signs of forced entry. No security footage. Just a torn hospital gown and a smear of muddy footprints leading to the window. The prints led to the tree line. After that, they stopped. Tom didn't know what to believe anymore. He started keeping a shotgun by his bed, started drinking too much. His girlfriend left. He quit his job. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced something was clawing at his floorboards. One night, he thought he saw a handprint on the inside of his bathroom mirror. Long, narrow fingers. Mud under the nails. A month passed, then another. Then the stories started. A hiker found dead near Lake Fort Phantom Hill, body half buried, chest torn open like a paper sack. A rancher's cattle slaughtered, dragged toward a culvert near the highway. Reports of strange sounds at night, something digging, whispering under the ground. No one mentioned the girl. No one mentioned Monroe, but Tom knew. He knew. He started driving again, back roads mostly, sleeping in the truck. He'd parked near the mile markers some nights, watching the ditch. Waiting. He thought maybe he'd see her again. Maybe get answers. Then one night he did. She stepped out of the trees like a ghost. Her dress was new now, clean. Her hair combed. But her eyes were the same cold, bottomless. She walked right up to the truck and looked at him through the windshield. He opened the door. Stepped out, heart hammering. "You," he said. She nodded. "What is it?" he asked. "What's down there?" She tilted her head like she didn't understand the question. Then she said, "It comes when the earth gets hungry." And with that, she turned, walked slowly down the slope, and vanished into the ditch. Tom waited until dawn, but she never came back up. He had been on the road since before sunrise, Pushing east on Highway 90 with a pack of Camel Lights, a lukewarm thermos of gas station coffee, and the last remnants of whatever had made him care about much of anything. His name was Thomas Elroy, and he had no real destination in mind, just the vague intention of getting as far away from Tucson as he could before nightfall. The July heat bore down on the pavement like the hand of God, turning the two-lane highway into a shimmering ribbon of asphalt, cracked and forgotten in long stretches. This part of Texas between Sanderson and Del Rio was a dead zone. You could drive for miles and not see another soul. Just thorn brush, busted fences, the occasional rusted-out feed store hunched like a broken spine, and the endless sky pressing down like judgment. The first time he saw her, she was standing on the shoulder just past a weather-bleached billboard. That read "Drink Borden Milk." Her hair was long and dark, falling over her shoulders like tangled rope, and she wore a thin white dress that billowed slightly in the breeze. No bag, no hat. Just her, barefoot and waiting. He almost didn't stop. God knows he hadn't stopped for anyone in years. Not since Julie, not since the accident. But something in him jerked his foot off the gas. Maybe it was the way she didn't look at him, or how she didn't seem to notice the car until it had already pulled up beside her. "You headed east?" He called out, leaning across the passenger seat to push the door open. She nodded once. No smile, no hesitation. Just slid into the seat without a word. The car's interior temperature dropped instantly. The AC wasn't even on. Thomas felt the chill in his bones, sudden and sharp, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. He glanced at her, trying to be discreet. Pale skin, hair damp with sweat, or was it something else? She smelled faintly of river water and old stone. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers thin and still. She looked straight ahead, not at him. "Don't get many hitchers out here," he said, trying to force some air into the quiet. "Too hot, too empty." She said nothing. He glanced in the rearview mirror. That's when he saw it. Her face reflected in the mirror was wrong. Her features were the same, more or less. High cheekbones, a slight downturn to the mouth, a curve of jaw that reminded him, sickly, of someone he couldn't quite name. But where her eyes should have been were two smooth hollows, like the sockets had been scooped clean and healed over. The skin there was as pale and unmarked as the rest of her face. It didn't bleed. It didn't even look wounded. Just gone. He stared for a beat too long, and when she turned her head slightly, as if sensing his attention, he jerked his eyes back to the road. A long silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Didn't mean to stare." Nothing. Not a sound from her. The only noise was the steady hum of tires on old pavement and the occasional rattle of something loose in the trunk. He kept glancing at the mirror. He couldn't help it. Every time, her reflection stared straight ahead with those empty sockets. In real life, seated next to him, she never moved. Never blinked. If he hadn't felt the cold air pouring off her, he might have doubted she was there at all. He passed Langtree without stopping, the gas gauge edging toward empty. The sun had started to slide lower in the sky, bleeding orange into the western horizon. Shadows stretched long and thin across the road. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, somewhere near the edge of Devil's River, just before the turnoff to an old rest area that hadn't been serviced since the Reagan administration. She spoke. "Do you still see me?" Her voice was quiet. Not whispery or menacing. Just unsure, like she genuinely wanted to know. Like it mattered. Thomas's throat tightened. He didn't answer right away. He stared ahead, hands locked on the steering wheel. There were no headlights behind him, no traffic ahead. Just him, her, and the road. "Do you still see me?" She repeated. He forced himself to look, not at her. At the mirror, the seat behind. Him was empty. A gust of air hit him like a slap, freezing, wet, unnatural. The windshield fogged up in an instant, ice forming along the edges like veins. The rearview mirror clouded over, and a bloom of frost spread across the dashboard like a living thing. He slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt at the side of the highway. Heart pounding, he scrambled out and staggered a few steps into the ditch, bent double and dry heaving. The sun had almost fully set, casting the sky in deep purples and bruised reds. When he finally forced himself to look back at the car, the passenger door was still closed. He crept toward it like a man approaching a coffin. The seat was soaked. Not just damp-soaked, like something had melted there. The leather steamed faintly, and a single trail of frost curved from the headrest down across the seatback and disappeared into the crack where the cushions met. No footprints, no trace of her on the gravel. Just cold and silence. He left the key. Door open and sat down hard on the shoulder, cigarette trembling between his fingers as he lit it. Smoke curled into the dry evening air. Off in the distance, a coyote howled once and fell silent. He told himself it had been heat stroke, a hallucination. Something about the heat, the loneliness, the miles. But even as he said it in his mind, he knew it was a lie. Because when he glanced one last time into the rearview mirror before starting the engine and driving away, he saw her just for a second. No eyes. No mouth. Just the suggestion of a face watching from the back seat like a memory that wouldn't leave. He never picked up another hitchhiker after that. Wouldn't even slow down. Not on that stretch of Highway 90. Not anywhere. And when people asked him why he moved to the city, why he sold the car, why he kept all his mirrors covered, he'd say something vague, something about age, nerves, bad dreams. But late at night, when the house was still and the world outside was dark and breathless, he'd remember the way she looked in the mirror. And sometimes, if he was drunk enough, he'd close his eyes and hear her voice again, soft and unsure. Do you still see me? And God help him, the answer was always yes. It was near midnight when Mitch saw the glow of the gas station lights through the heat-distorted darkness. The stretch of US 77 between Corpus Christi and Brownsville was long, straight and unforgiving, a needle of asphalt cutting through a whole lot of nothing. He'd been driving since Austin, and even though he'd planned to fuel up in Kingsville, he'd missed the exit while distracted by a podcast about Texas ghost towns. Now the fuel gauge in his '08 Tacoma was bleeding toward empty, the little yellow light blinking its warning like a dying heartbeat. He was about 12 miles past Kingsville when he saw the glow, white fluorescence, and the unmistakable green and orange signage of an old roadside gas station, the kind you don't see much anymore. The building looked aged but intact, sitting squat and low beside the highway, its concrete lot cracked and baked from years of sun. There were two ancient pumps, the kind with manual rollers that tick the numbers up like an old cash register. The sign above read Collins Gulf, though the U in Gulf had long since flickered out. Relief washed over Mitch as he pulled in. The place shouldn't have been comforting. It looked like it hadn't been renovated since the Reagan era, but it was better than stalling out in the middle of the road, miles from anything. He parked beside the pump, shut off the engine, and stepped into the sticky warmth of the night air. There was no sound but the chirr of crickets and the low ticking of his truck's cooling engine. He looked toward the building and noticed a figure inside, an older man behind the counter, backlit by the faint yellow light of the office. He looked up, caught Mitch's eye, and offered a slow wave. Mitch waved back, then went to the pump. It was old, sure, but it worked. The gas flowed. He filled up, capped the tank, then stepped into the tiny station store to pay. The smell inside was a combination of motor oil, beef jerky and that musty scent you only find in places that have too many ceiling tiles and not enough circulation. The old man was tall, lean and stoop-shouldered, with thick glasses and the kind of face that had seen a lot of sun and a lot of years. His name tag read Harold, written in fading ink on a laminated badge. "Running on fumes, weren't ya?" The man said, voice creaky but pleasant. "Yeah," Mitch said, smiling. "Was supposed to stop back in Kingsville. Missed the exit." "Kingsville?" The old man scratched at his chin. Haven't had too many folks come through late at night lately. Glad I was open." Mitch looked around. The place felt like a throwback. The walls were lined with dusty candy bars, faded soda fridges, and a stack of old newspapers, all dated from the early 90s, oddly enough. "You here every night?" Mitch asked. "Every night," the man said. "Someone's got to keep the lights on for the drifters and road-weary." He said it with a smile, but there was something behind it. Something tired, maybe even a little sad. Mitch paid for the gas and bought a bottle of Coke and a pack of gum for the road. "Appreciate it," Mitch said. "Not sure what I would have done if you weren't here." The old man nodded. "Just make sure you get where you're going." Mitch walked out to his truck, waved again, and pulled back onto the highway. In the mirror, he watched the station shrink into the blackness. He expected to see the lights disappear behind a hill or curve, but instead they just faded. Like they were being swallowed by the dark. He made it to Brownsville by 2 a.m., checked into a motel, and crashed without even brushing his teeth. But he couldn't sleep well. Not because of the bed or the highway noise, but because something about that place kept needling at him. It wasn't just the outdated decor or the old man's manner. It was the feeling that the station didn't belong there, like it had been dropped in from another time. Still, he chalked it up to exhaustion. The next morning, after a greasy motel breakfast and a lukewarm shower, Mitch decided to drive back up US 77. He didn't even know why, exactly. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. He just wanted to stop back by the station, say thanks again. Maybe even ask Harold a few questions about the place. It should have been easy to find. The road was long and straight, and there weren't many structures along the way, mostly just mesquite brush, low fences, and wide, flat stretches of parched land. He drove 10 miles, 15, then 20. Nothing, got no building, no lights. Number. Pumps. He slowed to a crawl, eyes scanning the roadside. He found a stretch that looked vaguely familiar, same cracked pavement shoulder, same stand of leaning power lines, but there was no gas station. No sign, just tall grass and scrubland. Like no one had built anything there in decades. He pulled over and got out. The heat was already brutal. Cicadas screamed in the trees. Dust blew across the shoulder in thin, ghostly veils. He looked around and spotted a rusted post with 2 broken bolts sticking out of the concrete, like it had once held a sign. But the rest? It was just gone. Back in Kingsville, he stopped at a diner to get lunch and decided to ask the waitress if she knew about the place. "Old Gulf Station?" she asked, pouring his iced tea. "Out past the city line, right off 77? "That's the one," Mitch said. "Was there last night? Met a guy named Harold. Just wanted to thank him again." The woman stared at him the way people do when they're trying to decide if you're screwing with them. "That place burned down," she said slowly. "Back in 91. Caught fire after a lightning strike. Whole building went up. Owner was still inside. Man named Harold Collins. Died in the blaze. Place has been gone ever since." Mitch laughed a little too loudly. No, it couldn't have. I was just there." "Talk to him." He filled the place with lights. Pumps still work. She shook her head. "You might have pulled over. Near where it used to be. People do that sometimes." say they see things, but there's nothing out there. Nothing but ghosts. Mitch left the diner in silence. He drove back to the same spot again. The next day, still nothing. But here's the part that made his stomach turn. When he checked the truck's odometer and his credit card statement later that night, there was no record of the gas purchase. Tank was full, sure, but no receipt, no charge. It was like the whole thing had never happened, except it had. He remembered the smell of the station, the sound of the old rollers on the pump, the way the old man had smiled like he was glad for the company but had been waiting too long for it. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of him. He dug through old archives online, local news clippings, anything he could find. And there it was. Harold J. Collins, owner-operator of Collins Gulf Service, killed in a structural fire August 7, 1991. Fire department arrived too late. Cause of fire: electrical storm. No other injuries reported. There was even a photo. The same man. Same glasses. Same smile. So now, every time Mitch drives south on 77, he slows down near that old stretch of road. Sometimes he sees nothing. Sometimes he sees the broken post. And once, just once, when the sky was heavy with summer thunderclouds and the air smelled like ozone, he swore he saw a flicker of light in the distance. A glow too steady to be lightning. He didn't stop. He just kept driving, hands clenched. On the wheel, eyes fixed on the line where the horizon met the dark. It was some time past midnight when Kara left her sister's place in Aransas Pass, the familiar tension of old family wounds still clinging to her like the smell of stale cigarette smoke. Her sister had started drinking around 10, which always led to stories about their mother and all the reasons Kara should have stayed closer to home. By 11:30, Kara had had enough. She said her goodbyes, hugged her niece, and stepped out into a heavy fog rolling off the bay like slow breath. The air was thick, muffling sound and smearing the orange glow of the streetlights. She turned onto FM 1069, the two-lane farm road that wound north toward Ingleside. It was quiet, empty except for the wet hiss of her tires on the asphalt, the kind of quiet that made you turn down your radio just to be sure nothing else was out there. The fog licked against her headlights in long, ghostly streaks, making the world seem smaller with each passing mile. She'd driven this road dozens of times, maybe 100, but it never felt comfortable at night. On one side, there were low, muddy pastures pocked with mesquite and saltgrass. On the other, the occasional chain-link fence and abandoned mobile homes slumped like forgotten things, their windows black and hollow. The road curved and dipped in little ways, not dramatic, just enough to make you lose your bearings if you didn't know it. That's when she saw the first one. At first, Kara thought it was a deer, maybe a dog, something pale and low darting through the fog ahead of her. But it moved too smoothly, too deliberately, like it wasn't running so much as gliding over the road. No bounce, no legs she could see. Just a pale blur cutting across the lane and slipping into the dark grass beyond her headlights. She instinctively eased off the gas, scanning the roadside, but there was nothing. No eyeshine, no movement. Just fog and night and the rhythmic thunk of her tires over old cracks in the pavement. She shook her head. Maybe she was just tired. It had been a long day. Another mile or so passed, and her nerves began to settle until she saw two more. Were closer. On the right shoulder, crawling alongside the road, pale as moonlight, down low like animals, but not moving like anything she'd ever seen. They moved fast, unnaturally fast, elbows and knees pumping in unison but with no noise, no friction. They didn't look at her. They didn't seem to notice the car at all. Her stomach dropped. She sped up. Not dramatically, not yet. Just enough to get past them, put a little distance between her and whatever the hell those things were. Her fingers tightened on the wheel, eyes darting from road to shoulder to rear view. The fog thickened, wrapping everything in a shroud of gray that felt more solid than hair. Then something tapped her window. Not hard. Not like someone trying to break in. Just a soft, quick tap-tap, like fingernails. Kara screamed. Her foot slammed the gas and the car lurched forward. 70, then 75. Her pulse roared in her ears as she jerked her head to the side, expecting to see a face peering in. But there was nothing. Just the blur of white movement along the passenger window, keeping pace with her car. It was crawling, still crawling. On its hands and knees, impossibly fast. Its body was stretched long and thin, pale skin tight over muscle and bone, the limbs too long, too fluid. The head was low, chin almost dragging, and she couldn't see a face. Just smooth, empty skin. Like wet porcelain. Then it was gone. She didn't see it drop away, it was just suddenly not there. The road was empty again. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. She wanted to pull over, to get out and vomit, scream, anything, but she didn't dare stop. Not on this road. Not now. The GPS said 10 more miles to INGLESIDE. 10 miles. Kara turned off the radio, then turned it back on. The silence was worse. The fog was so thick now she could barely see the fences lining the road. It wasn't natural fog, she was sure of it now. It didn't move right. It swirled without wind, clung to the windshield like breath. The air in the car grew colder. She flipped the heater on even though it was still 80 degrees outside. At the 5-mile mark, she saw them again, dozens, maybe more. All along the roadside, slithering out from the pastures and ditches, crawling low, limbs moving in perfect rhythm. Their bodies were hairless, skin so pale it looked blue in the headlights. Some had mouths, gaping wide, too wide, full of small, sharp teeth. Others had no faces at all, just smooth ovals where eyes and noses should be. They didn't look up. They didn't need to. They knew she was there. She swerved as one lunged toward the road, and for a moment it was underneath her car. The whole chassis thumped, and the steering wheel kicked like she'd run over something solid. She didn't stop. She didn't dare. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. She glanced down. No SERVIC, no bars. No LTE. Nothing. Then the lights on the dash flickered. Just once, but enough to make her heart skip. The headlights dimmed, then steadied. She prayed. Not to anyone in particular, just to whatever might be listening. Please, she whispered, please just let me make it. That's when she saw the sign. Ingleside city limits. A wave of relief surged through her. She took the first right she saw, a little residential road that led toward the marina. Her plan was to pull into a gas station, a store, anywhere with lights and people, but the streets were empty. All the storefronts were dark. It was like the town had gone to sleep and forgotten to wake up. She finally pulled into the lot of a closed diner, the old kind with checkered tiles and peeling signs. She threw the car into park and turned off the engine, breathing hard. Her eyes burned from crying. She wiped her face and tried to laugh, a thin, shaky sound that died in her throat. Then something moved in the fog ahead of her. Not on the road this time. In the parking lot. She stared, heart pounding, as the figure emerged, crawling, of course. Its arms and legs moved in long, perfect motions. It was closer than the others. She could see the way its shoulders rolled unnaturally, how its spine curved too far back with each crawl. It looked wrong. It looked like a human who had never learned to stand. Another figure emerged. Then another. They weren't fast now. They were slow, deliberate. Taking their time, she turned the key. Tried to start the car. Nothing. She turned it again. Still nothing. The headlights flashed once, then went dark. The figures were almost at her driver's door. One reached out, pressing a hand against the window. Its fingers were long, wet-looking, with nails like splinters. It tilted its head toward her, and she saw its face, or what was left of one. No nose, no eyes. Just a gaping mouth that opened wider as it got closer to the glass. Kara screamed and slammed her fists against the horn. Nothing. Just the fog. And the crawlers. They were all around her now. The last thing she remembered was the sound, not loud. Not angry. Just a soft, wet scrape against the glass, like something trying to find a crack to slip through. They found her car 3 days later, still in the diner parking lot. No damage, no sign of struggle. The driver's door was locked. Keys in the ignition. But Kara was gone. Gone like she never existed. And sometimes, just sometimes on foggy nights, folks driving along FM 1069 swear they see pale figures crawling through the mist. They say they don't look up. They say they move too fast. But every now and then, one does look, and if it does, don't slow down. Don't look back, because if it taps your window, it already knows your name. It was a sunless afternoon when they hit the stretch of I-45 that cuts between Houston and Dallas, the kind of lightless gray that presses down on your skull and makes every thought feel just a little heavier. The rain had stopped maybe an hour earlier, but the road still hissed under the tires, and the trees that flanked both sides of the highway were soaked black like they'd been steeped in ink. Mark was behind the wheel of his old, sputtering Tahoe, hunched forward like he could drive faster just by willing it. In the passenger seat, Jess was flipping through the playlist on her phone with a glazed look that only boredom could carve into someone's face. In the back, Danny, Mark's younger cousin, was passed out. Mouth open, headphones askew, hoodie up. They were driving north, back from some pointless weekend in Houston, an old friend's house party that none of them had really enjoyed. Mark had been in a foul mood since they left the city limits. His GPS had started screwing up, rerouting constantly and lagging, freezing every few minutes with a smug, robotic recalculating. Eventually he shut the thing off and figured he knew the route well enough. I-45 was straight and familiar, the kind of road you take when you don't want to think. But somewhere between Madisonville and Centerville, things got strange. "That's the third time I've seen that sign," Jess said, pointing at the green. Mile marker they passed. It was small waist height, and it read mile 233. Mark glanced at it, then at her. "You sure?" "Yeah, I've been watching. It was 233 20 minutes ago. And again just now? Same angle, same weird dent in the top." Mark didn't say anything. The road hummed beneath them like a tuning fork. He figured maybe Jess was wrong. Maybe she was misreading it. But when they passed another marker a few minutes later, it was the same again. Mile 233. Green. Dent on top. Tilted just a little to the right like it had been hit by something. He slowed the car a bit, looking in the rear view. There were no other cars around. The highway was nearly deserted, just long flat asphalt unspooling between trees that grew thicker with every mile. "That's weird," Jess muttered. "It's the same one. I swear to God, Mark, it's like we're driving in a circle." "That doesn't make sense," he replied, but quietly. His hands tightened on the wheel. He kept scanning the GPS screen on his dash even though it was off. Jess leaned forward, tapping on her phone. "I've got no service," she said. "Just nothing. Not even one bar." "Try restarting it," Mark said. He was trying to keep calm, but there was a fluttering now, a subtle unease rising in his chest. He looked at the gas gauge, still above a quarter tank. Everything should have been fine. Danny stirred in the back seat, pulling off one of his headphones. "We stop or something?" he mumbled. "No," Mark said. "We're still driving. Go back to sleep." But Danny sat up instead, rubbing his eyes and squinting out the window. "It's dark," he said. "Why's it so dark? It's cloudy." "No," Danny insisted. "It's darker than before. The trees ... they look weird." Mark didn't want to look, but he did. The pine trees bordering the highway looked wrong somehow. They weren't just thick and tall, but unnatural. Like they'd grown too fast or were leaning just slightly inward, bending toward the road as if to listen. He felt the muscles in his jaw tense. Another minute passed, maybe. 2, and they passed the same mile marker. "Mile 233, Jess said, her voice sharper now, panic creeping in. "Mark, I'm telling you, this isn't right." Mark pulled over. Not fast, not sudden. Just slowly guided the Tahoe onto the narrow shoulder, wheels crunching gravel. Engine still idling. Jess stared at him. "What are you doing?" "I need a second," he said. Maybe I'm tired or something. Just give me a second." He stepped out of the car and shut the door behind him. The silence was immediate and total, thick as wet cotton. No wind, no birds, just trees and stillness and that endless ribbon of road. The air smelled like wet asphalt and pine sap and something else, something faint and metallic, like rusted iron or blood left in the sun too long. He walked to the front of the car, then turned and looked back at the road they'd just traveled. No other vehicles. No lights. No sign of where they'd come from. The mile marker they'd just passed was maybe 100 feet behind them now. Green. Dented. Crooked. Mile 233. Mark stepped toward it, crunching slowly down the shoulder. When he got to it, he reached out and touched it. It was cold. Wet from the rain. The dent at the top had rust along the edges, like it had been there for years, but then he noticed something that made his stomach drop. Carved into the base, just above the dirt, were 3 sets of initials, Mum JJD and D. He stumbled back. "What the hell?" he muttered, backing toward the car. He got in without a word, turned off the engine for a second, then started it again. "We're going to keep driving," he said, gripping the wheel. Jess looked at him, then noticed how pale he was. "What did you see?" "Nothing." "Let's just go." For another 20 minutes, they drove, slowly. Every mile stretched longer than the last. The trees pressed tighter. The sky seemed heavier. And then they saw it again, mile 233. That's when Danny started to cry. "Something's out there," he said, pulling his hoodie tight around his face. "I saw something in the trees. I saw a man." Mark didn't look. Jess did, and her hand flew to her mouth. There was something in the woods. Not a man exactly, but a shape. Tall, lean, darker than the shadows, and moving. Not walking, but gliding, almost. Following them, Jess turned around to face Mark, her eyes wide and unblinking. "We have to stop." "No," Mark said, speeding up. "We're not stopping. We just keep going until we find a town. A sign, something." But there was nothing. No exits. No lights, no signs. Just trees. The mile marker. The road. And that thing in the woods. Then, just as suddenly, the mile marker was gone. It wasn't there the next time. They drove and there was no sign. No 233. Nothing at all. Just empty road and looming forest. And then, when Mark looked in the rearview mirror, Danny was gone. The back seat was empty. No sound. No scream. Just gone. Jess turned to, gasped, unbuckled her seatbelt and scrambled into the back seat, clawing at the air like she might find him if she just looked hard enough. "Danny!" she shouted. "Danny!" Mark pulled over again, this time jerking. The wheel hard, tires skidding in the wet. He threw open the door and stepped out into the silence again, but louder now, heavy humming silence, like it was pressing against his ears. Jess jumped out too, running back down the road, calling for Danny, tears in her voice, but the road behind them was empty. No trees, no sign, no anything. Just a gray void that swallowed sound. Mark walked to where the mile marker used to be. Nothing there. Just soft dirt, freshly turned, like something had been buried there. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down. No notifications. No service. But on the black screen, faintly, a green number glowed. And behind him, from the woods, something stepped out. The wind out there didn't blow so much as it whispered. Not the kind of whisper that rustled trees, either more like something soft pressing against your ears, tugging at the edges of your thoughts. That's how the desert sounds at night, especially on the unpaved roads stretching off Highway 67 west of Fort Stockton. If you break down out there, it's just you, the dirt, and the creeping dark. Eli had been driving a rental, some pale silver crossover SUV with bad tires and a stuttering AC unit that had been wheezing since Van Horn. He hadn't meant to take the side road. Just wanted to shave off a few miles, save gas, maybe catch some stars away from the highway lights. His mistake was thinking he could outguess the desert. Locals never tried to reason with it. Not the real ones, anyway. But Eli wasn't local. Rental had groaned and shuddered and finally sighed to a stop around 8:17 p.m. According to his phone, which still had 22% battery and no service. The sun was a memory by then, and the horizon had gone from blood orange to coal in about 20 minutes. Nothing but mesquite scrub and sand for miles in every direction. No fences. No signs. No movement. Not even the buzz of insects. He popped. The hood poked at things he didn't understand and sat back in the driver's seat, waiting for a miracle. Or at least a truck, but nothing passed. Not a pair of headlights, not a single beam. Just more darkness thickening around the car like molasses, heavy and quiet. He figured he'd sleep in the car and hike out at sunrise. Probably 10 or 12. Miles back to the junction, doable. He had one bottle of water, a handful of mixed nuts, and a sense of optimism that hadn't yet been ground to dust by the desert. That was before the dog showed up. At first, it was just a shape at the edge of the beams. Something low and dark, limping toward him from the scrub. Eli thought maybe it was a stray coyote, or maybe one of those desert mutts that scavenged roadkill and chewed on bones bleached white by the sun. He watched it with a kind of detached curiosity, like watching a shadow decide whether or not it wants to be real. But then the shape moved into the reach of the headlights, and the first thing he noticed was its eyes. Not glowing like animal eyes catch light. These were darker than the dark around them eyes that didn't reflect, just stared. Flat and wrong. Then it stepped closer, and Eli's brain stuttered. It didn't make sense right away. It was a dog. Kind of. Medium-sized, maybe 40 pounds, covered in patchy fur and dust. Its back legs moved like any mutt's would, but the front, those weren't paws. Not even close, they were hands, human hands. He blinked again, wiped at his face like sweat or dust might be fogging up his sight, but it didn't change. The thing limped forward on its back legs and hands. It planted its palms down. In the dirt like a toddler crawling, but it wasn't childlike. It was too sure, too heavy. The fingers splayed and pressed into the grit, curled for grip. You could see the dirt sticking to the skin. Nails cracked and blackened, knuckles too big and too long. Like they'd been stretched. It stopped just before the beams touched it. Right there at the edge of the light, where details get lost and everything goes soft. It stood still, panting. Slow, its tongue hanging wrong from a crooked jaw. Then it sat Dot and watched Dot. Eli didn't move for a long time. Couldn't. He sat behind the wheel, hands on his thighs, eyes locked on that damn thing. Every instinct screamed at him to do something. To get the hell out, but what could he do? Car wouldn't start. No service, no weapon. He wasn't even sure if it was real. Maybe it was the heat, or stress, or dehydration. Something that would make him see hands where there weren't any. He forced himself to look away, to count to 10, to breathe deep and slow. When he looked back, it was still there. Hours passed like that. The dog didn't move, didn't sleep. Just sat with its head tilted slightly, eyes fixed on him like it was studying something, waiting for a cue. The hands rested on the ground in front of it, fingers twitching every so often. Eli didn't. Try to sleep. Just sat frozen in the driver's seat, listening to the silence stretch and crack around him. Sometimes the wind would pick up a little, and he'd imagine hearing things in it, whispers, voices, the scrape of fingernails on glass. Once, around 3 a.m., he could have sworn it stood up, rose slowly like it was testing its weight. But when he blinked, it was back on its haunches dot by morning. The thing was gone. He got out of the car on shaking legs, half expecting to see tracks. Or maybe blood, something. But the desert had covered its presence completely. Not a single footprint. Just the same endless stretch of dirt and mesquite and distant sweltering sky. He hiked back to the road and flagged down a cattle truck around noon. Didn't tell the driver what he saw. Didn't tell anyone, not even the guy at the rental agency who asked what happened to the bumper. He hadn't noticed it was cracked until later. Like something had pressed hard against it. Something with fingers. For months afterward, he'd dream about it. That shape just sitting there at the edge of his vision. Sometimes the dreams change, sometimes. The thing would walk upright, slow and awkward, with its hands swinging at its sides like pendulums. Sometimes he'd wake up and swear he could still smell it, like damp fur and scorched meat. One night, 6 weeks after he got back to Houston, Eli found long scratches on the patio door. Not claw mark scratches. 4 lines, parallel, like fingers. That same night, his dog wouldn't stop barking at the backyard. Barked for hours until his throat went hoarse and raw. The glass door was fogged with breath marks the next morning. On the outside, now Eli doesn't go near the desert anymore. Doesn't take side roads. Doesn't drive at night. He moved to an apartment in the center of the city on the 10th floor, surrounded by glass and concrete. But sometimes, even there, he swears he sees something just beyond the parking lot lights. Sitting still, waiting, watching, and now and then, just before he closes the blinds, it raises a hand and waves. I was somewhere south of Uvalde when the sun started to bleed out over the hills. The sky had that washed-out orange tint, like a peeled peach left in the heat too long, and I was running low on gas. Highway 83 was empty in that late July way heat waves. Rising off the asphalt, cicadas buzzing themselves hoarse in the brush. Nothing but long stretches of barbed wire fencing and broken telephone poles to keep you company. I'd been driving since Del Rio, not really heading anywhere, just chasing miles, maybe running from something. I don't know. I didn't see the town until I was practically in it. No sign, no warning. Just a sudden collection of faded buildings, squatting in the heat like they'd always been there. The place didn't look abandoned exactly, but it didn't look alive either. A short main strip, maybe 6 or 7 buildings, grocery store, barber shop, gas station, diner. All the windows were dark or fogged, some with dusty old blinds half pulled, some open and gaping like mouths mid-sentence. The kind of town where time had started to rot at the corners, but I had maybe 10 miles left in the tank. and I hadn't seen a gas station in the last hour. I pulled into the only station there. No brand name. Just a single rust-bitten pump with a cracked digital readout under a tin awning. The building behind it was squat and square, a convenience store maybe, though the glass door was smeared with something yellowish like old pollen or nicotine. There was a bell above the door, but it didn't ring when I pushed it open. Just the sound of stale, refrigerated air and the low, constant buzz of a television somewhere in the back, and the static. That hissing snow you get when there's no signal. I could hear it before I saw the screen, pulsing like breath in a sick room. The store was lit, barely. Pale green fluorescence flickering in a ceiling lattice that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since Reagan. There was a man behind the counter, motionless. Early 60s maybe, in a red vest that said Gas and Go over a dirty work shirt. His face was slack, eyes blank, not even glassy, just empty, like the pupils weren't taking in light. His mouth hung a little open, lips chapped and cracked. He didn't blink when I walked in. Didn't move at all, just stood there behind the register with the screen behind him spitting static. "Pump still work?" I asked. He didn't answer. But the door had unlocked automatically when I came in, and the lights were on. Something had to be running. "Okay, I'm gonna fill up," I said, backing out slowly. Still no reaction. Like talking to a mannequin someone left standing too long, I filled the tank. The numbers ticked, slow and glitchy, like the machine wasn't sure how to count anymore. The heat beat down on my neck, and I felt it again, that heavy quiet that wasn't quite silence. Like the town was listening. When I walked back into pay, the man hadn't moved, not 1 inch. Same open mouth, same staring eyes. "Card machine working?" I asked. He didn't blink. I slid my card anyway, more out of habit than anything. The screen flashed green. Transaction complete. A small printer choked out a receipt. Then I noticed the others. There were people in the town. A woman across the street, standing in a hair salon window, her face tilted slightly to one side, mouth parted, eyes empty. A boy in a cowboy hat at the diner window, standing behind a counter of uneaten pies. An old couple sitting side by side on a porch swing that didn't move, their mouths open just enough to make your stomach twist. Every window I could see, there were televisions inside, all of them showing the same static, same rhythmic hiss. A sound that wasn't just noise if you listened long enough. It had a shape to it, a pattern. I left. I didn't even look back when I got in the car. Just turned the key and gunned it, peeling out so hard the tires kicked up pebbles. The radio, which had been off, clicked on by itself. Just static. Same hiss. I punched the dial and cut the power dot by the time I hit the next junction, 83 North. Toward Leakey, I checked the rear view and saw nothing. No town. Just empty road and mesquite scrub. My stomach churned like I'd swallowed battery acid. I tried to find it later. I mean, of course I did. Curiosity's a sickness. I pulled up Google Maps on my laptop 3 nights later, sitting in some cheap motel outside San Antonio with flickering bulbs and mildew on the shower curtain. I zoomed in and out, dragging the little yellow street view guy up and down 83. Nothing. No gas station. No diner. No town. I called up satellite view. Scanned the area inch by inch. There was a break in the trees, near where I remember pulling. Over, a faint square, like a parking lot maybe, or an empty foundation. No buildings, no roads. Just pale soil, faded to white under the sun. I looked closer. There was something not right about the way the shadows fell in that spot, like they bent wrong. Not with the angle of the sun, but towards some other axis. Almost like the land itself was sloping into a hole you couldn't see. I stared at that spot until my head hurt. Eventually, I closed the laptop and lay down, but I didn't sleep much. The static was in my ears again, soft and pulsing like a heartbeat. I started dreaming about the place. Not like normal dreams, no narrative, no movement, just being there. Standing on the edge of the street with the sun hanging like a nailed coin in the sky and every window showing static. Everyone staring, open-mouthed. The sound buzzing in my head deep behind the eyes. Sometimes I'd wake up with my mouth open, dry, tongue cracked, like I'd forgotten how to swallow. A week later, I went back. I had to. Logic be damned. I had to see it again. See if it was really there or if my brain had just hiccuped under the pressure of heat and long miles. Drove south on 83. Passed. All the familiar markers, cactus fields, the old rusted windmill, the tiny cemetery with the iron gate. I slowed down near where I thought the town should be. There was nothing. No road leading off. No cracked pavement. Just empty land and heat haze. I pulled over, walked into the brush a little. Saw a dead armadillo curled on its side, ants crawling over the eye sockets. But when I turned to head back to the car, I saw the man. Same red vest, same work shirt, same cracked mouth, standing 20 feet away behind a thicket of dry brush, staring at me. No blink. No sound. Just there. I blinked and he was gone. But when I got in my car, the static was playing again. No radio, just static. Louder this time, like it had been waiting. I haven't driven south since. I avoid highways now. I keep the TV unplugged. But sometimes, when the power flickers in my apartment, I catch it just for a second on the black screen. A face. Street. A row of staring people. Static crawling across their eyes like mole dot, and sometimes I think I hear it under the silence of the night. That sound. The sound of a town that's still there, just beyond where the maps can reach. Waiting. Watching. Calling. They say Keller is one of those towns where nothing truly bad ever happens. Quiet streets. Football on Fridays. Churches at every corner and neighbors that wave. But that's just the surface. Peel it back, drive long enough down FM 1709 past the polished subdivisions and gas stations, and you'll come to the part of town that developers forgot. Trees hang low over the cracked two-lane road, and the fences sag like they've been waiting too long for someone to fix them. Out past the lights, before the last gas station, there's a tunnel, small, old, unmarked. Locals just call it the Whisper Tunnel. It's nothing special to look at. Just a short underpass that dips beneath a disused rail line. The walls are graffiti tagged with layers of teenage rebellion, most of it harmless. A few dates, a couple of names, some symbols that nobody understands or remembers anymore. You blink and you're through it. But people in Keller don't like to drive through it after dark. Some say their radios go static when they do. Some say their phones freeze up or reboot. A few say they hear something. Back in 2018, it was just a weird local legend. The kind of thing that kids dared each other about. You'd hold your breath going through it or say some chant someone's older brother made up to summon the tunnel lady, like a low-budget Bloody Mary, but none of that really mattered until the night Alyssa Wentworth went missing. She was 16. Soft-spoken, sharp, popular in that subtle way where people liked being around her even if they didn't really know why. She wasn't loud or wild. Not the kind of girl anyone expected to make the news. But on October 14th, around 12:17 a.m., she stepped out of her friend Morgan's car just 50 feet from the tunnel and walked into the dark. Barefoot. Morgan was the one who told the cops what happened. They were driving back from a party in Southlake, 3 of them in the car. Morgan, Alyssa, and a guy named Jay. Morgan swears they were stone-cold sober parents had threatened to breathalyze them at the door. They weren't drunk. They weren't high. just tired. It was a quiet drive until they hit the edge of town and started down FM 1709. Jay had his phone out, scrolling, not saying much. Morgan had the radio low. Alyssa was in the back seat, half asleep. They were maybe a quarter mile from the tunnel when Alyssa sat bolt upright. No one said anything. She just suddenly looked alert, almost scared. Morgan glanced back and asked if she was okay. Alyssa didn't answer. She looked out the window, stared into the trees like she was trying to hear something. Morgan told the cop she thought maybe Alyssa was having a panic attack or hearing voices, something mental. But Jay later said he heard it too, a whisper. He said it was faint, like wind down a pipe. Like something dry and tired and very far away, but somehow inside the car. Just a whisper, Alyssa. He turned around in his seat, thought maybe it was Alyssa messing with them. But she was pressed up against the door, eyes wide, breathing fast. They were 20 yards from the tunnel when Alyssa unbuckled and said, "Did you hear that?" Morgan said, "What?" But Alyssa was already opening the door. She kicked her sandals off right there on the road. No one knows why. She just stepped out into the cold night, barefoot, and started walking toward the tunnel. At first, they thought it was a joke. Jay started laughing, nervous, awkward, but when Alyssa didn't stop, when she kept walking with that weird slow pace, like she was hearing something pulling her forward, Morgan called out, "Alyssa, what are you doing?" She didn't answer. Didn't even turn around. She just kept walking into the dark. Jay got out to go after her, but by the time he reached the edge of the tunnel, she was gone. He swore up and down she couldn't have gotten far 10 seconds maybe, but the tunnel was empty, dead quiet. They found her sandals just outside the entrance, still warm. They waited, called her phone, called her name, drove around to the far side of the tunnel, thinking maybe she'd come out that way. She didn't, but they did find something on the far end. Tucked neatly in the dirt like someone had set them there with care, were her shoes. Her real ones, the ones she had left back at Morgan's house. No one could explain that. The cops didn't believe the story, of course. They thought she ran away. Maybe the party wasn't as sober as they claimed. Maybe she was upset, maybe high. Maybe she meant to vanish. But none of that made sense. Her phone was found 2 weeks later, off in a storm drain 3 miles away. The GPS history showed her last known location right at the tunnel, at 12:17 a.m., not a step further. And then there were the whispers. It started slow, a rumor at first. Kids on their way home late at night started rolling down their windows as they passed the tunnel, daring each other to listen. And sometimes they heard it, a voice, a name, Alyssa. Never louder than a breath, but distinct, personal, like it knew you were there. Some kids tried to film it. No one caught anything real. Audio always glitched, came back garbled. A few videos picked up static. One girl swore the whisper said her name instead. She didn't. Sleep for 3 nights. Said she saw someone standing at the edge of her yard, barefoot, watching her window until sunrise. It's not just teenagers anymore. Adults have heard it too. A delivery driver from Fort Worth claimed he heard his daughter's name whispered from the tunnel, even though she was alive and well, sleeping at home. He wouldn't go near that part of the road again. A retired teacher swears he saw a girl walking out of the woods near the tunnel last March, just before dawn. Said she looked unfinished, pale, wrong, like she'd been away too long. They say if you stop your car right at the edge, just before midnight, and turn off the engine, you can hear more than just a whisper. That if you're quiet enough, patient enough, the tunnel speaks. Sometimes it calls to you. Sometimes it knows your name, and sometimes it doesn't want you to leave. There are stories of people walking through it and never coming out the other side. A hiker from Grapevine, A boy from Keller High. All cold cases. All vanishing within a mile radius of the tunnel. No cameras caught them. No bodies found. Some believe the tunnel was built wrong. That something old lies beneath it, an older road. Or an older structure. One of those hidden scars Texas never really admits to. Others think it's a kind of echo chamber for the dead, where lost souls gather like dust in corners. But none of the stories agree on one thing. What's inside? A few people think Alyssa is still alive, that maybe she crossed over into some other place, and if you go deep enough into the tunnel, deeper than it looks, deeper than it should go, you'll find her, still barefoot, still walking, following the whisper, but no one who's gone in after her has ever proven it. And yet, the whispers continue. Drive past that tunnel after midnight and you'll hear it. Maybe it says her name. Maybe it says yours. Either way, once you've heard it, you'll never forget it. It lodges somewhere deep in your head, a thin, papery voice that comes back when you're alone. It knows when you're driving late. It knows when your windows are down. It waits, and it's always calling someone new. The sun had barely cracked the horizon when Hank Laramie saw it. He was hauling southbound on State Highway 6, just coming out of Bryan, watching the flat fields roll by like an endless sea of dry brown. Early morning mist clung low over the asphalt, and even though the temperature was already creeping into the 80s, it carried the heavy, wet chill of farmland dawn. Hank had driven that stretch more times than he could count over the last 12 years, and there wasn't a curve or gas station he didn't recognize. But that morning, just a few miles north of College Station, something caught his eye on the side of the road, something that hadn't been there yesterday. At first, he thought it was a wreck. Just off the shoulder on the eastbound side, nestled awkwardly in a shallow ditch between two patches of wild grass, was the shell of a car, blackened, twisted, burned clean down to the frame like it had been through hell. Smoke wasn't rising from it, not anymore, but a thin shimmer hung in the air around it, as if the heat hadn't quite left. As Hank slowed his rig and pulled to the side of the road, he could see the shape more clearly. It was a four-door sedan, maybe a silver or light blue once, but charred now, the paint peeled back like old skin. The windows were gone, just jagged rims of melted safety glass clinging to their frames. Every inch of it was scorched, warped, cooked in place, and there were people inside. 3 of them that he could make out, 2 in the front, 1 in the back. Not sitting still like you'd expect from the dead. No, these people were moving, thrashing. Their hands were slapping at the windows, frantic, desperate. Their mouths were open wide in silent screams, and though he couldn't hear them through the windshield of his truck, Hank swore he felt their cries echo in his chest. It was like a silent movie playing out in front of him, too horrifying to look away from. He grabbed his CB first, tried to hail any nearby truckers. Dead air. Then he fumbled for his cell and dialed 911. "I got a wreck," he told the dispatcher, voice shaking. "Car's on fire off SH6, east side of the road, mile marker." "Hold on," he peered out, trying to spot the number. "Mile marker 243. There's people inside, and they're alive. They're burning alive. Sir, are you safe?" The dispatcher asked. "Is your vehicle at a safe distance from the fire?" "I'm across the road. I'm good, but they ain't Jesus. They're... He had to stop himself, his throat locked up. He'd seen wrecks before. Trucks jackknifed, deer hits, even a flipped van once, but nothing like this. Nothing that made him feel like he wasn't really awake. The dispatcher told him to stay put, that help was on the way. That Fire and M's were en route from College Station. Hank nodded, numbly, and stared across the highway. And then the pounding. Stopped out the people in the car, all 3. froze like puppets with their strings cut. One by one, they slumped. First the driver, then the front passenger, then the backseat figure, collapsed against scorched leather. Motionless. Hank sat in the cab of his rig, heart hammering, mouth dry. The acrid scent of gasoline floated on the breeze. It was strong, stronger than it should have been for a fire that had clearly burned out. It was cloying thick, like it had soaked into the ground. He couldn't tell if it was coming from the car or from somewhere else. He opened his door, stepped out, and as soon as his boots hit the gravel, he felt the heat. It wasn't blazing, not like a fire still burning, but the air had weight. An invisible oven pressing in from all sides. The smell of fuel hit him hard, enough to make his eyes water. He took a few steps toward the ditch, and the car was empty. No figures. No movement. Just scorched seats and the skeletal steering wheel. He blinked, leaned forward, squinted into the haze. Maybe his eyes were playing tricks on him. Maybe the light was refracting weird in the mist. But no, it was empty. Clean. Of any human presence. And yet, on the inside of the driver's side window, there were 5 clear handprints, soot-smudged, streaking downward. Like someone had dragged their fingers down the glass while it was still there. He backed away, climbed into his cab and shut the door hard enough to rattle the hinges. The first responders showed up 10 minutes later. Local sheriff's cruiser, lights flashing. A young deputy, maybe mid-20s, with a too-clean uniform and eyes that had seen far less than Hank's. He gave Hank a nod and walked toward the burned-out car, one hand hovering near his holster like the damn thing might jump at him. Hank stayed in the truck. More cars came. Fire engine, paramedics, another patrol, vehicle, then a white pickup with state trooper markings. They fanned out around the car, looked it over, talked quietly among themselves. One of the paramedics came up to Hank's window. "You the caller?" He nodded. Double quotes, "We got your report." "You said there were people inside?" "There were," Hank said. 3 of them, moving, yelling. "I saw it." The medic looked uncomfortable. "There's ... no bodies, no evidence anyone was inside. No signs of trauma, blood, bone. Not even any signs of recent combustion. The car's cold. Been that way a long time." "That's impossible," Hank said, louder than he meant to. "It was burning when I got here." The medic shook his head. "No burn marks in the ditch. No grass scorched. The vins melted. But we'll try to pull a number." "I'm sorry, sir, but whatever you saw, it wasn't today." That night, Hank didn't sleep. He drove the rest of his route in silence, pulled into a truck stop west of Houston, and sat in the cab for hours. Lights off. He kept seeing those faces, twisted in agony, hands beating against the glass. But what gnawed at him deeper was how real it had been. How alive they were in that moment. Not hallucinations. Not shadows. He didn't go back up SH6 for a week. When? He did. The spot where the car had been was empty. No ditch. No skid marks. No blackened grass or crushed underbrush. Like the land had healed over, or worse, like it had never happened. He made a quiet call to one of the college station deputies he knew from previous runs. Asked if there'd been any update on the burned sedan. The deputy was quiet a moment. "We never found a Vang. Car was stripped of any ID. No license plate. No numbers on the engine block. Hell, no engine left, really. We sent it up to Houston for forensic analysis." "And?" Hank asked. "Best guess? That car's been sitting like that for decades. Maybe since the 90s. Maybe longer. It's got rust under the burn. Stuff that takes years to form." "But..." "I saw them," Hank whispered. "I saw people. They were alive." There was a long pause. Then the deputy said, "You ever hear the story about the Weaver family?" Hank said no. Back in '96, there was a family coming down from Waco, husband, wife, teenage daughter. Took a wrong turn off the 6 after a late-night football game. Never made it home. Cops searched everywhere. Air Patrol, dogs, the whole. 9 yards. No wreck found. No clues. Just ... gone. 3 people, Hank muttered. Yeah, the deputy said. 3. You think you saw them? Hank didn't answer, but he stopped running that route after that. Gave it up completely. Refused to drive past mile marker 243. Told his dispatcher to put him on I-45 instead, even if it meant more hours and less pay. He never saw the car again, but sometimes, just before dawn, when the mist is thick and the wind carries the scent of gasoline, he swears he hears fists pounding on glass, and he never stops to look. The sun was dying out west, painting the scrubland in bronze as it sank behind the broken ridges of the Shinati Mountains. Paige watched the light drain from the sky like blood from a fresh wound, her fingers nervously whirring a tear in the knee of her jeans. In the passenger seat beside her, Brian tapped a thumb against the wheel, the beat uneven, nervous. The old Dodge Dart coughed up dust in little plumes behind them, rattling slightly every time they hit a rut in the cracked blacktop of Route 67. They were 3 hours south of Marfa, heading toward Presidio where they'd booked a cheap Airbnb cabin near the border. Paige had wanted one last weekend escape before fall semester swallowed her whole at Austin. Brian had found the place online quaint desert retreat. The listing promised, private, secluded, perfect for stargazing. It wasn't until they passed the ghost town of Shafter, its crumbling stone buildings swallowed by mesquite and creosote, that the road began to feel like it was unspooling into nothingness. No more gas stations. No towns, just flat desert. Fence lines rusted and snapped in places. Mountains crouching in the distance like half-buried bones. They first noticed the van about 20 minutes out from Shafter. A white cargo van, no logos, no rear windows, just a boxy, unmarked slab of vehicle cruising up behind them, maybe half a football field back. Brian had spotted it first in the rear view. We've had the road to ourselves for like 2 hours, he said, brows drawing together. Where the hell did that thing come from? Paige twisted around to look. Probably someone heading to Presidio, she offered, though the van gave her a weird feeling immediately. It looked clean, too clean for a desert vehicle. Not a speck of dust on the windshield. And those windows blacked out to the point of mirror-darkness. Brian slowed a little, curious if the van would pass. It didn't. It adjusted speed perfectly, maintaining the same distance. When Brian sped up again, the van matched it, neither gaining nor falling behind. I don't like that, Paige muttered, her voice tight. Yeah, me neither. They played the game for another 15 miles, the sun long gone now, the road, lit only by their headlights and the occasional glint of reflected moonlight off roadside signs. Every time Brian tapped the brakes, so did the van. Every swerve, every speed change it mirrored them exactly, like a shadow trying too hard to stay real. When they reached a long straightaway flanked by nothing but flat sand and thorny brush, Brian pulled off into a turnout, crunching to a stop by a sagging barbed wire fence. He killed the engine. The van stopped too. Just sat there, motionless, maybe 60 yards back. They waited. 10 seconds. 30. A full minute. Paige counted the ticks on her phone's clock. Nothing. Brian turned the key again, the Dart coughing to life. Let's see if this creeps. Committed. Back on the road, they pulled out, tires spinning dust. The van did too, almost in unison. Not behind them anymore, but beside them. It glided up until it was just off Paige's side, pacing them perfectly, its black windows reflecting. Nothing but desert and starlight. She leaned forward, trying to peer inside, but it was like looking into a void. No lights, no shadows, no driver. Jesus, she breathed. Brian, I don't think there's anyone in it. Don't say that, he muttered, keeping his eyes fixed on the road, knuckles white on the wheel. Don't screw around. I'm serious. There's no lights on either. And the way it moves, it's not right. She reached into the glove box, fumbling for the little LED flashlight they kept for emergencies. Cracking the window, she flashed it across the van's windows. The beam bounced off the glass like it hit a mirror, blinding her with its own reflection. No silhouette. No driver. Not even the hint of a dashboard dot. She pulled the window up fast and didn't say anything else. The van stayed with them for another 3 miles. Then, without warning, it jerked sharply left off the highway. No signal. No hesitation. It just peeled into the desert, tires leaving no visible tracks, and glided out into the flat sand and sagebrush like it had been waiting for an opening. Within seconds, it was swallowed by darkness. Brian slowed, pulled over again, and stared after it. There were no lights receding in the distance. No taillights. Nothing. Paige rolled her window down again and leaned out. Total silence. The desert stretched wide and mute, broken only by the chirp of insects and the distant bark of some night animal. I want to leave, she whispered. They drove the rest of the way to Presidio in near silence, checking the mirrors every few seconds like the van might return. It didn't. At the Airbnb, an old ranch shack perched on a dry ridge, they tried to laugh it off. Drank a couple of beers on the porch. Brian suggested it might have been some elaborate prank. Maybe it's some weirdo local, he said. You know how these border towns can be. Get bored, get creative. But Paige never forgot how the van turned into the desert like it didn't need a road. How it never left tracks. How it matched them so exactly, every curve and stop, without ever showing a driver. That night she couldn't sleep. Wind howled across the desert, shaking the windows in their frames. Sometime after 2 a.m., she got up to pee and noticed a faint hum outside, like the whine of an idling engine. When she looked out the window, there was nothing but starlit sand. The next morning, she found Brian already awake, standing barefoot in the dirt by the front steps. He was staring at something. Tire tracks, he said, voice dull, fresh. She stepped closer. Just one set, leading straight to their cabin and stopping maybe 20 feet from the door. Then nothing. No turn, no retreat. The tracks just ended, like the van had vanished. They packed up early and left without eating. The main road felt different now, less like a lifeline and more like something that didn't want them there. They didn't speak until they hit the edge of Marfa, cell reception flickering back to life like it had been hiding. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. A month later, back in Austin, Brian found the same van parked across the street from their apartment. No plates, no markings, same blacked out windows. It didn't move all day. Then, sometime around midnight, it was gone. Paige began seeing it too. Once in the ET parking lot. Once parked outside a gas station she'd stopped at on a late-night study break. Always just sitting there, quiet, facing her. No driver, no movement. She stopped telling people about it, especially after the third time someone asked if she was okay. If maybe she was just under stress. She began having dreams. Dreams where the van pulled up beside her on a long black road and the door slid open silently, revealing nothing inside but an impossible darkness that sucked the light from everything nearby. In the dreams, she always woke up right before. She stepped inside. 3 months later, Brian disappeared. He texted her late one night. It's back. Won't stop following. Might go talk to it. She never saw him again. No body. No car. Just a final ping from his phone somewhere along Route 67 a few miles north of Presidio. When the sheriff called her, he sounded tired. Said the desert eats people sometimes. That it's easy to get turned around out there. He didn't ask about vans. Didn't seem surprised Page still dreams of it. Of the black windows and the way it hums like it's alive. Sometimes, late. At night, she thinks she hears the faint crunch of tires on gravel outside her apartment. Sometimes, she opens the blinds and sees nothing at all. Other times, she sees two perfect tire tracks leading nowhere. They found the first teeth just before noon on a Wednesday in late July, the kind of dry, gusty day that makes you feel like the wind itself is trying to peel your skin off. Highway I-27 shimmered under the heat. That stretch between Lubbock and Abernathy like a long, half-dead snake sunning itself. The Texas Department of Transportation had finally released funds to repave the northbound lanes, a project that had been delayed for years due to budget nonsense and a lack of public interest. Nobody cared about that part of the road. It was nothing but miles of flat, dry earth, a few fence lines, and the occasional pump jack nodding like an old man drunk on cough syrup. The road itself was ancient by highway standards, laid in 1964 by a now-defunct contractor called Calico Western, which no one had heard of since Nixon was in office. The teeth were first spotted by a guy named Dale Hooks, a heavy-set backhoe operator with a pack-a-day habit and a habit of eating his breakfast burritos while operating machinery. He thought they were bits of gravel at first, the white chips popping up through the thick black skin of asphalt as the milling machine scraped away the upper layers. But then he noticed they were too smooth, too uniform. He picked one up and turned it over in his gloved hand, squinting against the sun. It was unmistakably a molar, and not a small one either, big, yellowish, with the root still intact. The guy beside him, Curtis, a lean, jittery man who'd once done time for a bar fight in Leveland, thought Dale was joking. Then he saw the second tooth, and the third dot. By the time the foreman called for a stop, they'd uncovered more than 50 teeth in a span of about 10 feet. The grinding drum had sliced through the asphalt like a deli slicer, revealing layer after layer of what looked like embedded dental remains, not in a pile. Not scattered. They were embedded in neat, even rows, like they had grown there. The state police were called, and then someone from Texas Tech's Forensic Anthropology Department. A woman named Dr. Olivia Brandt came out in a pair of sunglasses and heavy boots, squatting beside the excavation like she was admiring ancient pottery. She was the first to notice how the teeth weren't just embedded in the upper asphalt. They went deep, buried all the way to the original bedrock. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. She estimated the number conservatively at 3,000 in the first half-mile alone. There were no signs of jawbones, no skulls, no tissue, no enamel erosion consistent with age. They were in perfect condition. Too perfect. The story hit the Lubbock Avalanche Journal by Friday and spread quick on local radio. People joked about it at first, highway to the Muller Zone and Tooth Fairy's mass grave. But when the state ordered a full archaeological hold on the repaving project, things turned from weird to downright ominous. Locals started showing up at the site, trying to sneak through the barriers for a look, even stealing a few teeth as souvenirs. One of the reporters from Channel 11 caught an older man, maybe in his 60s, trying to pull a chunk of asphalt free with a crowbar. When they asked why, he just muttered, "It wasn't supposed to be uncovered. Not yet." The guy disappeared. 2 days later, Dr. Brandt and her team started digging deeper, trying to carbon date the teeth. The results made no sense. Some of them dated back to the early 1800s. Others were modern. A few came back as pre-Columbian. There was even one set, a pair of incisors that tested as being nearly 3,000 years old. The lab thought there was a contamination error, but the results held up under repeat testing. That's when the state tried to shut everything down. Officially, it was due to environmental concerns. They sent a team to pour concrete over the exposed sections and quietly divert the paving project. Brandt protested but was escorted off the site by armed troopers. Something about the way they moved, quick and precise, said this wasn't the first time they'd been ordered to contain something. Rumors started up again, not just about the teeth, but about the road itself. Old stories that nobody really paid attention to suddenly had new weight, like the one about the school bus that vanished in 1978 between exits 15 and 18, or the woman who walked the shoulder at night, seen in the rearview mirrors of truckers, her mouth open wide, bleeding from her gums, her eyes begging not for help, but for silence. My uncle worked for TXDOT back in the late 80s, and he used to tell this story when he was drinking. Said the original stretch of I-27 was rushed through construction after a failed land buy from some reservation out west. Calico Western got the contract dirt cheap, and instead of tearing up the native burial grounds they ran into, they just dumped fill dirt over it and paved. He claimed some of the men who poured the original concrete quit within a week. Others went missing entirely. There was talk of a contractor who vanished during the night shift, just left behind a boot in the gravel and a thermos filled with blood. Most people wrote that off as cowboy myth. But now, looking at the pictures Brandt managed to leak online, blurry, zoomed-in photos of perfect bicuspids pressed like fossils into asphalt. I don't know. The teeth aren't just there. They're placed, organized, like something meant to be seen eventually. Then there's the sound. That's the part no one outside of the crews talks about. After the discovery, but before the state buried it, some of the workers started reporting a strange low-frequency hum like a dental drill in the back of your skull. Only it wasn't coming from a machine. It was coming from the road itself. From underneath, Dale Hooks, the one who found the first tooth, started complaining about it constantly. Said it kept him up at night. Said it followed him home. His wife found him in the garage 2 weeks later, curled under the truck, bleeding from the mouth. Every one of his teeth had fallen out. They were arranged on the floor in a straight line. She swore she never touched them. That same night, Brandt emailed her last report to a contact in Austin. The file was corrupted. When they finally recovered it, all that remained was a single sentence. They were fed to it. No one's heard from her since. About a month later, they finished the repave. Laid down thick new concrete over the exposed areas, triple sealed it with steel mesh and thermal surfacing. And that stretch? Still weirdly smooth. Never cracks, never potholes. It's as if the road wants to stay whole. Truckers won't drive it after dark. Some take the back routes, even if it adds an hour. There's a kid on Reddit who posted a dashcam video driving through that stretch around midnight. He says the radio started picking up a high-pitched static that sounded like whispering. The tape cuts off suddenly, mid-curve. His car was found 10 miles north, parked on the shoulder with the engine still running. No sign of him. Just a faint trail of blood leading into the dry brush. And now it's starting again. Heard from someone in Plainview last week, a deputy, that another repaving project is being scheduled. Same company doing the contract work. Different name now, but the same parent firm that used to be Calico Western. He said they found a patch of road near exit 24 that looks like it's breathing. Asphalt rising and falling like a chest. I told him not to go near it. He laughed. I haven't heard from him since Thursday, and I swear, I don't know if it's just in my head or not, but ever since I drove that stretch 2 nights ago, I've had this ache right behind my molars, dull, pulsing, like something pushing its way up. I haven't slept. My gums are bleeding. I think it wants out. It was early August, the kind of Texas heat that made your skin feel too tight. The sun hadn't even set yet, but the air had that hazy scorched tint, like everything had been run through a filter of dust and despair. Dale Warren had driven that back road off TX6 for 20 years, mostly when he was running late or trying to avoid traffic through Hearn proper. The road was unpaved in parts, with loose gravel that sang under tires and a shoulder so narrow it might as well not exist. You took it if you knew what you were doing, and Dale knew. Or thought he did. He had just left a job site in Bryan, some rich rancher's summer home halfway to completion, and he was bone-tired, shirt stained with sweat and drywall dust. He took the turn instinctively, his old Chevy rattling as it hit the first curve in the back road. There wasn't much out there, just a string of crumbling farmhouses and fields that stretched so wide they almost looked like they'd drop off into nothing. Cornfields this time of year, mostly tall, dry, just past their prime. The kind of corn you wouldn't eat, but that someone somewhere turned into cattle feed. It was on one of those long, empty stretches where he saw them. First he thought it was a trick of the light, maybe heat waves making something shimmer in the distance. But as he got closer, he could see clear as day children standing in the corn rows, evenly spaced, all of them facing the road. They weren't playing, weren't moving. Just standing there, deep in the rows but visible enough between the stalks. There had to be 7, maybe 8 of them, each about 4 or 5 feet tall, not babies but not quite teens. Their clothes were old-looking, too clean to be normal, almost like something out of a church play or maybe a sepia-tone photo in a dead relative's attic. One had suspenders. Another wore a bonnet. The tallest had a wide-brimmed hat tilted, just enough to shadow his face. None of them moved. Then, as Dale passed, they all raised their arms, not in a wave, not in a stretch. Arms up, straight out, palms flat, like they were reaching toward the sky or maybe like they were trying to stop him. A full row of tiny figures, motionless, their hands rising as one. There was no sound, not even the rustle of corn in the breeze. Just the thrum of his engine and the sudden sour taste of fear climbing his throat. He looked in his rearview mirror, half expecting to see them walking out onto the road, maybe following him. Nothing. Just the empty stalks, a blur of gold, and shadow. His foot lifted from the gas before he even realized it. The truck slowed, dipped slightly in the gravel. Against every instinct he had, he turned the wheel. He had to see again. Had to make sure he hadn't dreamed it, or worse, hadn't imagined it like some roadside mirage cooked up by heat stroke. And highway hypnosis. The tires groaned as he backed up, gravel spitting from under them. He turned around in a narrow opening where the fence was broken and slowly rolled back toward where the kids had been. He kept the window down, ears straining. For any sound, there was nothing. Not even birds. When he reached the stretch again, the field was empty. The corn was undisturbed. No sign of children, no shadows, no parting in the rows. But then he saw them marks. Not footsteps in the dirt, but something stranger. Blackened impressions in the soil where the kids had stood. Charred outlines, like someone had taken a branding iron and pressed it into the earth in the shape of bare feet. Each print was scorched into the dirt, still smoking faintly. Dale stepped out of the truck before his brain could stop him. The smell hit him first like burnt hair and ozone, sharp and wrong. He crouched down, touched the edge of one of the prints. It was warm. Too warm. The corn around the prints looked healthy, but just past the first few stalks, deeper in the rows, the plants were twisted. Not broken, twisted. Bent into spirals, stems and leaves coiled like they'd been spun by an enormous hand. And it wasn't. Just one patch had continued, deeper than he could see. He backed away fast, got back in the truck, and drove. Not fast enough, he'd later think. but fast enough to make the tires screech when he hit pavement again. He didn't tell anyone at first. Not his wife, not the guys at the job site, not even his brother who lived just north of Hearn and knew all the weird backroads better than anyone. He kept it to himself. Until he saw them again. A week later, different job, different drive home. This time near Calvert. Another cornfield, another empty road. And again the kids. Same stances, same clothes, same lifted arms. This time, they were closer to the road. So close he could make out their faces. No expressions, no blinking. Eyes that were just slightly too dark. Skin pale, but not in the way kids get when they're sick. This was something else. Like flour. Like dust. Like the color had been leached out of them. Their mouths were closed, but Dale swore he could hear something. A hum, low and constant, that vibrated in his chest more than in his ears. He didn't stop this time. Sped past, went 40 miles out of his way to stay on highways, sweating and shaking even though the AC was blasting. That night he couldn't sleep. The hum followed him into dreams. The cornfield stretched into his bedroom, the stalks growing through the walls, the floor, even his own body. In the dream, the children stood at the foot of his bed, arms raised again. This time, he heard them whisper words he couldn't understand, language he didn't know. He woke up gasping, the inside of his mouth dry and bitter, his skin damp. He started asking questions, subtle at first. At the gas station on TX6, he asked the old man behind the counter if he remembered any stories about the area. The man squinted, gave a non-committal shrug, said something about weird Mennonites and old country folk who used to farm out that way. At the diner, he asked a waitress what the cornfields were used for, if anyone still lived near them. She gave him a look like he'd asked how to bury a body. Finally, he went to the Historical Society in Hearn, dusty little building near the rail line. An old woman named Miss Van told him more than he wanted to hear. Used to be a children's home near there, she said, adjusting glasses so thick they made her eyes look bulbous. Not like foster care, more like hard labor for orphans. Run by the church, they said. Run by someone else, if you ask me. Burned down in '42. Story goes, the kids died locked in the barn while the cornfields caught fire around them. Dale felt his stomach lurch. Fire? Yep, whole place went up like tinder. No one ever figured out how it started. No one much cared. Was wartime. People had other things to worry about. But ever since then, folks say the corn don't grow right out that way. And sometimes people see things, kids, standing in rows, staring. He didn't go back down those roads after that. For a while things calmed. No more sightings, no more dreams. But the hum never really left him. It settled into the walls of his house, into the floorboards. Sometimes he'd turn off the TV late at night and hear it again low, constant. Like it was waiting. And then his niece disappeared. 12 years old, vanished during a camping trip near Lake Bryan. They found her footprints in a patch of scorched earth. Bare feet, even though she'd gone missing wearing shoes. Her parents were destroyed. Dale didn't speak at the funeral. He knows it's connected. He knows whatever those children are, ghosts or echoes or something worse, they're still out there, growing in the corn like mold in a dark cupboard. He dreams of them more often now. They're closer in the dreams, no more whispering, just watching. Waiting. Last week, he drove back to that road off TX6. Couldn't stop himself. It was dusk when he arrived, the sky bruised purple, the corn swaying slow. And there they were lining the rows like sentinels. This time they didn't raise their arms. They just smiled. Not wide, not exaggerated. Just the bare curve of lips. And Dale finally understood something. Those weren't smiles. They were invitations. He'd left Tucson a little after 7 p.m., hoping to make it to El Paso before midnight, but Interstate 10 had other plans. By 9:30, traffic was crawling at a dead man's pace just west of Las Cruces. Flashing lights up ahead marked the scene of a wreck, bad one, judging by the way the red and blue strobes lit up the mountainside like an ambulance disco. Smoke hung in the air, tainted with that bitter, metallic stench, isn't just burning rubber. Carter wasn't a patient man. He never had been. 47 years old, divorced, ex-construction foreman who'd once managed 60 workers on a Dallas overpass project and now worked freelance hauling audio equipment for regional events. He didn't like wasting time, didn't like sitting still. So when his GPS buzzed to life and announced alternate route available, save 42 minutes, he hit accept without thinking. A dull voice directed him, take next right in 1/4 mile. He glanced up from the dash and spotted an exit ramp unmarked, half covered in windblown sand, no overhead lights, no highway numbers. He almost passed it before jerking the wheel to the right. Gravel pinged against the undercarriage of his Tacoma as he crossed onto it. No other cars followed. He expected a frontage road, maybe a rural detour weaving back to the highway. What he got was a 2-lane stretch of cracked blacktop that narrowed into darkness like a throat swallowing a scream. No lights, no signs, not even the occasional reflective post to remind you this was something maintained by the state. The desert swallowed his high beams within 30 feet, beyond which everything went black. Not a moon, not a star. Just that suffocating, velvet black that makes you feel like you're driving through ink. Still, he kept going. The road curled inward, dipped in spots where rain had eroded the shoulder, rose again in low, lazy hills. He passed no intersections, no ranch gates, no power lines. The GPS stopped talking after a while. He glanced at the screen. It was stuck on a blinking recalculating for a long time before it just froze entirely. The signal died. He told himself it was fine. These detours always felt sketchy, but they linked up eventually. Still, a knot had started to form in his gut, one that pulsed in rhythm with the hum of his tires. He hadn't seen another vehicle for over 30 minutes. Hadn't passed a light source of any kind. Even the outline of the mountains had disappeared behind him. It was just flat, black nothing now. His headlights didn't reflect on anything. It was like the world ended 5 feet beyond his hood dot. He fiddled with the radio out of boredom and nerves. Nothing but static dot, and he saw it. A light, no aglow. Pale green, just ahead around a long bend. Not headlights, not fluorescent. A kind of eerie chemical glow that seemed to bleed into the sky from below. He leaned forward, squinting. The road widened suddenly, spitting him out into a little clearing. Dead center stood a gas station, one of those ancient ones you only saw in old movies, with a wooden overhang and a single glass booth up front. The building was squat and narrow, with cracked paint and a flat roof sagging like a bent spine. 2 ancient pumps stood beneath the overhang. A Coke machine buzzed quietly outside the door. The glow came from overhead lights, but they didn't look electric. The color was all wrong greenish, too dim to be useful, like glow sticks taped to the ceiling. But they lit up the immediate area, casting thin shadows in every direction. The rest of the desert beyond the station remained pitch black. He parked near pump 2 and got out. The air was bone dry and smelled faintly of something rotten, like milk left in the sun. There was no sound, no crickets, no wind. He was suddenly aware of how loud his boots sounded on the concrete dot inside. The station was brighter, not better. The fluorescents inside the small shop flickered and buzzed like dying wasps. The tile floor was yellowed and chipped. The shelves were sparse rows of dusty cans, expired candy bars, and grease-stained snack cakes that looked embalmed rather than baked. Behind the counter stood a man, late 60s maybe. White hair, thick glasses, flannel shirt. His skin looked off. Pale and grayish, stretched too tightly across his face, like he was wearing a mask molded from his own features. But he smiled when Carter walked in, and his voice was steady. "You took the wrong turn," the man said. "But we've been expecting you." Carter didn't respond right away. He just stared at the man, trying to place the strange tug in. His memory like deja vu, but stronger, like he'd dreamed this place before. "Expecting me?" He finally asked. The attendant nodded, slow and solemn, like he was confirming bad news. "We always know," he said. "The ones who come through here." Carter glanced around the store. A dusty ceiling fan creaked overhead. The place looked abandoned and preserved at the same time, like a gas station caught in amber. "You got a bathroom?" he asked, voice dry. The man didn't answer, just pointed a bony finger to a door in the back next to the cooler. Carter walked toward it. The hallway was narrow, the air colder. The door was metal and rusted, with a faded men's sign that looked burned into the paint. He pushed it open. Inside, the light was dim and yellow. The mirror above the sink was shattered, the shards spiderwebbed, but still clinging to the wall. As he approached the urinal, he noticed the silence again, so complete it roared in his ears. He finished his business, washed his hands in lukewarm water, and turned to leave. That's when he saw a dot in the mirror. His reflection didn't move with him. He froze. His own face stared back, but its expression was wrong. Not panicked, just knowing. A slight smirk forming in the corners of its mouth, eyes flat and distant, like someone wearing his skin. He spun around. No one behind him, turned back. The reflection was gone, just the broken glass now. He staggered back out to the main shop, suddenly aware of how dry his mouth was, how heavy the air felt, like breathing through wool. The man was still behind the counter, still smiling. "Sometimes they see things," he said. "Before it happens. Echoes, you might call them." Carter approached the counter. "What is this place?" The man looked past him toward the desert. "Not a place," he said. "More like a crossing." "To where?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he leaned down and placed something on the counter. A Polaroid. Carter looked at it. It was a photo of him standing outside Pump 2, hand on his truck door. But the background was different. No gas station. No light. Just endless, open desert. And in the photo, Carter wasn't alone. A figure stood behind him. Tall, thin, cloaked in black. No face. Carter blinked and looked up. "Where did you—" But the man was gone. So was the counter. So was the store. He was standing outside again, holding the photo in his hand. The gas station had vanished. No pumps. No structure. Just flat, cracked dirt. His truck was still there, but the tires were sunk halfway into the sand, as if it had been parked there for years. The headlights were off. The battery dead. He checked his phone. Still no signal. Above him, the sky was no longer black. It was just gone. No stars, no clouds, no ceiling to the world at all. Just a void. Then he heard it, a soft dragging sound, like something heavy scraping over sand. It was distant at first, then closer. No wind, no insects, just that sound. He turned slowly. The figure from the photo stood about 20 feet away, emerging from the darkness like it had always been there. No face, just a smooth, skin-like surface where features should be. Its limbs were too long. Its head tilted slightly, as if studying him. Carter ran. He didn't know where. Just away, but the road was gone. There was no road, no path. Just desert in every direction, all of it wrong. The sand was too soft, the shadows too deep. And the thing followed without moving like it was, gliding, gaining on him no matter how far he ran. He tripped and fell. The photo fluttered from his hand, landing face up in the sand. Now it showed something new. Carter's own face again, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream, and behind him, the thing was reaching out, inches from his neck. As he scrambled to his feet, the last sound he heard was the gas station attendant's voice, quiet, calm, drifting through the void. "You took the wrong turn?" But that's how it always starts.